Hello there, I'm Violet, your storyteller today. I'm actually an older woman, not young like most of the people who have shared their stories here. Actually, my story is more like my daughter's story, but she told me to go ahead and post it from my perspective. I think she doesn't feel ready to share her own perspective, and I hope she finally finds the courage to share her own story by herself. Until then, you can find out what happened through me. I was a single mom to my daughter, June. Her father passed away when she was 3 years old, and since then, it has always been me and my daughter. She is an amazing young woman, and I am really proud of raising a kind and compassionate girl like her. But I was always sad that she wasn't very lucky in love. After going through numerous heartbreaks, she ended up marrying Liam. Now, since the first day we met, I always had a bad feeling about Liam. One day, I actually sat down with my daughter and said, "I see that you have decided to marry Liam after all, but I don't know, June. Is he really the one?" "Yes, Mom, he is really the one. I'm so happy to be marrying a man like him. He is so much more clever and works harder than me sometimes. I think he's out of my league." "That is some nonsense, June. Anyone would be happy to have you. Liam has been making you feel this way, June. I see that he has been taking away your self-confidence. He demeans you and belittles you all the time. You know that's just who he is, Mom. It is true that he always got better grades than me and has a better job. I'm a little dumb, but he always knows what's right. He just wants me to do better, that's it." It was then I knew that Liam was a master manipulator. I had been approached by June's friends who worried that Liam was a controlling man and did what he wanted. Liam actually stopped many of her friends from contacting her once they stood up against him for his nasty attitude. I was seriously worried about my daughter and wanted to help, but my daughter was too far gone for me to do anything. I didn't want to confront Liam or do something drastic because I didn't want to risk getting cut off from my daughter. My best option was to stay connected so that I could swoop in when things got tough. To my surprise, my daughter seemed to be very happy after marriage. She had moved 2 towns over to live with Liam, and the new life was treating her well. She did stop talking to her old friends, but seemed to be in good spirits whenever I visited her. She seemed happy, and even Liam acted very civil, so I thought maybe Liam had bettered himself after marriage. Well, that wasn't the case, as I discovered very soon. When June got pregnant, she seemed to be over the moon about the pregnancy. Naturally, I was also super happy for her. She was very excited and made a lot of plans about everything. We planned her gender reveal and baby shower, and she even asked me to be in the delivery room. I also offered to come and stay with her for a few days so that it was easier for them to adjust to their new life. However, all those plans went down the drain when my daughter called me one day with a dejected voice. "Mom, we have to talk about something." "What is it, June? Is the baby okay?" "Yes, Mom. We got the ultrasound today to find out the baby's gender, but Liam doesn't want me to tell anyone." "Oh, that's okay, June. If you're okay with this, it doesn't matter. This means you will have more funds for a baby shower now, also less stress." "Mom, I'm not having a baby shower either." "What? Why?" "Liam says that it's a waste of money. You know I had to leave my job to take care of the baby, so I don't have spare money as such." "That's okay, June. I can pitch in. It's not a big deal. You are my only daughter, after all." "That won't work either, Mom. I don't know why, but Liam doesn't want to make this pregnancy a big deal. He also keeps saying how I'm getting too big and ugly, so he would rather not have everyone come and see me when I'm like this." I was taken aback by what my daughter was saying. You don't have to be a professional to know that this was downright toxic behavior. My concern for my daughter was returning in full force now. I didn't want to hound her for information because I knew she would close up and not tell me anything. I tried to control my emotions as best as I could and said, "What on earth are you talking about, June? This is not healthy behavior from your husband. This is ridiculous." "I know, Mom. He has been trying to control my diet too, but that didn't work since he is not at home most of the time. I think he's avoiding me now. What do I do, Mom? Don't worry, dear. None of this is your fault. Your husband is being stupid. You concentrate on your health and keeping the baby healthy. After you give birth, I will come to help you so that you two can have some quality time together. I'm sure that will make things much better. Mom, that is another thing I wanted to talk about. Liam doesn't want you in the delivery room, and he doesn't want you staying here with us, so it's best if you just visit us and leave. But we talked about this, June. You won't need help. What happened so suddenly? Did I do something wrong? No, Mom. You haven't done anything wrong, believe me. Mom, I want you here with me, but I feel like my husband is slipping away because of the pregnancy, and I don't want to pressure him anymore. I hope you understand, Mom. I see your point, June. I'm not angry, I promise you, but please, you need to talk to your husband. What he is doing is not okay. I am really worried about you now. Relax, Mom. This is just a rough patch. Maybe Liam is right. I'm just being too hormonal. I'm sure you know women can get crazy when they're pregnant. I would hate for you to worry for nothing. A mother will always worry, June. Just promise me you will be okay and you will call me when you need me. I will be in touch. That's all I could say to my daughter. I won't lie, but my motherly instinct was telling me that something was wrong. I was actually planning to visit my daughter and see what was going on, and I did visit my daughter to check for myself. Nothing seemed amiss, but it was true that Liam was rarely home. When I asked him, he made up some excuses about having work and being busy. For some reason, I wasn't buying it, but what else could I do? I didn't have enough resources to spy on him anyway. Very reluctantly, I had to let things go, but I did check in with my daughter a lot to make sure she was all right. June was actually getting really sad as her delivery date was arriving, and I didn't know why. I tried to ask, but she simply wouldn't tell me. Those were some of the worst days of my life when I was constantly worrying about my daughter. And turns out, I was right to worry. One night, I got a frantic call from none other than my own daughter. She was hysterically crying, and I instantly felt my heart sink. June, what is going on? Why are you crying so much? Tell me, are you okay? Mom, help me. I don't want to lose the baby. I think I'm going into labor. I can't get out of here. Oh my God, what is going on, June? Where are you, and why can't you get out? I'm at my house, Mom. I'm locked in the bathroom. I can't get out. I tried hard to push it open, but it's not budging. I don't want to use force, because I'm afraid I will hurt my child. How did you lock yourself inside, June? Where is your husband? Where is Liam? Mom, he. My daughter absolutely broke down when I mentioned Liam. She was crying so much that I was seriously getting worried about her. The distance between us was so big that I wanted to slap myself for not moving closer to her. She was so far away from me, and I knew I couldn't just run to her right then. I felt so helpless that I even expressed it in words. June finally controlled her tears and said, Mom, Liam is the one who locked me inside this apartment. He's been cheating on me, Mom. What? Liam is cheating on you? Yes, Mom. He's hooking up with his female friend. I found out recently, and we had been having fights. When I went into labor today, he locked me in the bathroom because he didn't want me to give birth today. I want to slap the life out of that horrible man. How dare he do this to you? Where is he right now? He's out with his mistress, Mom. Today is her birthday, and that's why he didn't want me to give birth today. He told me that his mistress would be upset if I gave birth to our son on her birthday. Mom, what do I do now? Listen to me, June. I'm on my way to you. Don't worry, dear. I won't let anything happen to you or the baby. But I can't be there on time, so you need to call 911 and get help. I didn't want to hang up on my daughter, but I knew that I had to make some other phone calls. I was so thankful to God that June was clever enough to hide her phone inside her dress before Liam pushed her into the bathroom. If she didn't have the phone on her, Lord knows what would have happened. June was saved from that godforsaken bathroom because of her phone. She was able to call me and 911 to get help. My daughter's tears were permanently lodged into my brain as I tried to figure out what my next step would be. What I did know was that I needed to reach my daughter as soon as possible. I left my house and drove over to my daughter's place as soon as I could, but I knew it would be a long time before I would make it to her, so I called that one person who I needed at this time. I called my boyfriend, Dante. Now let me tell you a little about Dante. I actually met him at a cafe when I was visiting my daughter at her house. Dante and I started talking about our kids, and we ended up really liking each other. Long story short, we are now dating, and it's been a while. And since Dante lived in my daughter's city, I knew that he would be able to help June and teach Liam a lesson. When I called him, he said, "Hey, is everything okay, Violet? It's quite late." "No, everything is not okay, Dante. My daughter just called me. She needs help." "June needs help? What's wrong? Is it something about the baby?" "It's about a lot of things, Dante. I'm still in shock about what I heard. Liam has been having an affair. Remember how I told you I had a hunch about him? Turns out I was right. He has done something horrible, Dante." I was struggling to gather my things and leave while telling Dante what was going on. Look, I'm an old woman and don't have much family around. He was the only one I could count on. I was desperate for help, and Dante knew that. In a deep voice, he said, "Tell me what he's done, Violet." "He's been cheating on my daughter with his friend. My daughter found out recently. Apparently, it's his mistress's birthday today, and he doesn't want June to give birth on the same day. So when she went into labor, he locked her in the bathroom and left." "What in the world, Violet? Your son-in-law is a monster. How could he do this to his own child and wife?" "I don't know anything anymore, Dante. I'm really worried about June. I told her to call 911 for rescue, and I was on my way, but I am still scared, Dante. What if something happens to June or the baby?" "Calm down, Violet. I'm here for you and your family. I will go over to the hospital right away. I will get in touch with my cop friends and find out." Yep, Dante was actually a cop, and also managed his father's business, where Liam was actually employed. He was also good friends with Liam's parents and knew a lot of people around town, so I was really relieved when he said that he would take charge and make sure my daughter was okay. He is a responsible man, which is what made me fall for him in the first place. Dante was also a single father to a daughter, so he knew exactly what I was feeling at the moment. He reached the hospital where my daughter was in record time and stayed with her since then. I rushed to the hospital where my daughter was. I went there as fast as I could. Dante had called and told me where they had taken her. I was lucky that I got to the hospital just in time to witness the birth of my granddaughter. I was so excited to be with June when she gave birth. That was the only good outcome of this entire fiasco. I did my best to make sure my daughter was comfortable after the storm she went through. I was also super happy to finally hold my granddaughter, who is the most beautiful baby in the world. She had eyes just like my daughter, and I was thanking our lucky stars that the baby didn't have that monster Liam's eyes. Not that it would make me love my granddaughter any less. After my daughter had the baby, she was sent to a private room at my insistence. Liam was still nowhere to be found and hadn't even called. When June was resting with the baby, she looked very sad. She was actually crying silently as Dante and I sat with her. She hadn't been able to contact Liam's parents because of everything, so it was only Dante and I with my daughter. Seeing my daughter in such a vulnerable condition absolutely broke my heart. June was crying and said, "I'm so sorry, Mom. I should have listened to you in the past. I stayed with my husband because I stupidly thought he loved me. All this while, he was cheating on me and didn't even care about our child." "No, June, don't say that. You had no way to know things would escalate like this. There is no use blaming yourself. Liam had been manipulating you all this while. You are a victim. But I could have done something, Mom. Instead, I just stood there silently while he ruined my life. I should have stood up for myself when he demanded that you shouldn't be in the delivery room and couldn't even come to stay with me. He was slowly isolating me from everyone while having the time of his life. It's okay, June. Sometimes we end up making mistakes. It's not completely your fault either. As I said, Liam was manipulating you. I'm so glad I was able to call you, Mom. Dante, I also have to thank you for coming here as fast as you could. You were really a big help before my mom came to me. It's not a big deal, June. You are like family now. But I do have a question for you, dear. What do you want to do about Liam? Dante, being the cop he is, was touching on the important subject now that June and her daughter were all right. Liam was still a no-show, and what pissed me off was that he didn't even check up on his wife after leaving her locked in a bathroom. Every time I remember my daughter crying and desperately asking for help, it makes my blood boil. Liam deserves to rot in hell. He did something truly horrible, and I didn't want my daughter to let him get away with it. I looked at Dante, silently telling him that there was no way we would let Liam go. However, ultimately, it was up to my daughter about what she wanted to do. She was his wife, after all. As much as I wanted her to leave Liam, I knew I couldn't force her to do anything against her will. So I gently patted my daughter's head and said, "Listen to me, dear. What Liam did was horrible. What he did could have made you lose your child, and even worse, if you hadn't had the cell phone with you, God knows what would have happened to you too. Do you want to still live with a man like that?" "No, Mom. I really don't want to stay anymore. In fact, I don't even want to go back to the house. I will be constantly worried he will return and do something to me and my daughter." "You don't have to worry about that, June. I will make sure Liam doesn't bother you. All you have to do is say the word. He is going to pay for what he did. My marriage is over. I know that much. There is no way I would ever get back with Liam. I would have tried for my daughter, but Liam has proven that he doesn't even care about her. Mom, I'm done with Liam. I don't know what to do though. I'm pretty exhausted." "It's all right, June. I understand that you are tired. Plus, you need to focus on your child now. So you look after your daughter while I will look after mine. I'm here for you, June. I promise I will make him pay." I knew what I had to do when June finally fell asleep. I talked to Dante and came up with a plan. Liam was going down, and he had no idea what was coming for him. Dante's cop friends were already at the hospital waiting to take a statement from my daughter. Since Dante was off duty, he couldn't really do this professionally, but he sure as heck was going to deal with this family. He talked to the officers, who then went to get June's statements. Then I told him to go ahead and make the call to Liam. Dante was going to call Liam so that I could hear the fear in his voice as he realized that his life would soon fall apart. I wanted him to feel at least a fraction of what my daughter felt when she was locked in the bathroom. So Dante gave Liam a call, which he picked up at the last ring. "Who is this, and why are you bothering me so late at night?" "This is Dante. I'm sure you know who I am." "Oh, hi Dante. What's up? Care to explain why you locked your wife in the bathroom as she went into labor?" "What? I don't know what you're talking about, Dante." "You don't know what I'm talking about? Then explain to me why I found June locked up in the bathroom, and you were nowhere to be found." "Look, man. She must have somehow locked herself in the bathroom and is now blaming it on me to save face. She can be very stupid sometimes." That's when the rage blew off the top of my head. He had the audacity to call my daughter stupid and pin the blame on her. This monster deserved to be slapped across the face. I was so angry that I didn't keep quiet anymore. "How dare you call my daughter stupid and pin all the blame on her? My daughter was only stupid enough to love you and be with you. that's all she is responsible for. You were the one who locked my daughter in the bathroom so that she can't give birth today. All this just because you didn't want your child to be born on the same day as your mistress. These are all lies. You and your stupid daughter are making up stories to defame me. I always knew you two were unhinged. Listen here, Liam. You will not insult my girlfriend and her daughter like that. I will not allow it. We have plenty of proof about what you did, and it can be classified as abuse. That's impossible. I didn't do anything. You have to believe me. Yeah, keep trying to protect yourself, Liam. It won't work. My daughter has recorded what you told her through the bathroom door. She isn't stupid like you said, Liam. Liam went absolutely quiet when he heard what I said. My daughter had already shown me the video where Liam was screaming from the other side of the door. My daughter was begging for Liam to let her out, while Liam was insulting her and demeaning her. It also showed very clearly that Liam had intentionally locked June in the bathroom. That video was super painful to watch, but I did it anyway. My daughter lived through that, and the least I could do was to understand her pain. The video made me and Dante even angrier than before. Liam was now full-on stammering because he knew he was caught. Okay, look. I know I messed up. It's not a big deal. You know what? I'll go home right now and unlock the door. It's not even a big deal. It's not a big deal? You could have killed your child and wife, Liam. In this entire conversation, you didn't even ask about them, even once. I didn't make this phone call to you to scold you, Liam. I called you to tell you what is waiting for you today and for the days to come. What do you mean? We are filing a police report against you, Liam. You will be arrested, put into jail for abusing your wife and an unborn child. I have the best cops on my team working on this case, and I'm going to make sure this whole town knows what you did. I already told your parents everything, so don't bother twisting my words. I will have the local newspaper print the story too, so that everyone knows what a monster you are. No. Listen to me. Don't do this, please. I'm sorry. There is no use begging anymore, Liam. You better hold your mistress tight tonight, because from tomorrow, both your lives will be hell. Those were the last words I said to Liam before hanging up on him. I was raging mad and was going to let Dante do exactly what he had planned. Together, we were going to ruin Liam so that he knew he messed up with the wrong person. I was also going to destroy his mistress, who thought it would be a good idea to have an affair with a married man who was about to have a child. Both of them were going down. I made that promise to myself and my daughter. Believe me, I kept it. Now I will give credit where it's due. Since Dante was very well known in that town, he was the one who did most of the groundwork. He made sure Liam was arrested and sent to jail, although he was able to bail himself out. Liam's reputation was already in ruins. His own parents had decided to disown him, and the same happened with his mistress as well. Since word had already spread around thanks to Dante, their family members were trying to save face by disowning their evil children. I should also note that Liam's parents are actually good people who came to visit my daughter and promised to be on her side. They were appalled by what Liam did and even told his other siblings what happened. His siblings had the same reaction and also ended up making contact with Liam. We could have gone for Liam's job as well, but we didn't. June was preparing for a divorce and had Liam served within a week. We were working with a good lawyer who assured us that we would take Liam to the cleaners. We wanted Liam to have his job so that he could pay alimony and child support. June also got full custody due to Liam's police case and abusive behavior. My daughter is actually doing a lot better now that she has adequate support. She actually moved into Dante's house, and we have all been living together for some time. Dante's daughter came to visit and helped us out by spreading the word to her friends, who happened to be Liam's friends too. It was glorious to see Liam lose support from all sides. After the divorce papers were served, Liam came to Dante's house begging for mercy and forgiveness. I let my daughter deal with him because I wanted her to get her own revenge and closure. I silently stood by her as she faced Liam. Liam was on his knees, crying for forgiveness, saying, "I'm so sorry, June. Please don't leave me. Please don't take my daughter away." "What daughter are you talking about, Liam? The one you almost killed so that your mistress doesn't get upset for sharing her birthday with my baby? I made a huge mistake, June. I swear this was the only time. I will never do this again. I love you and love our child. Don't make me laugh, Liam. You never loved me. You don't get to come here and beg for mercy after you almost killed both of us. We are done, Liam. You can go back to your mistress and have a dream life with her. We have already ended things. June, believe me. I never loved her. It was just. Spare me the details, Liam. I never wanted to know that anyway. It doesn't matter how many times you strayed or if you have ended things with her. What matters is that you cheated and left your wife and daughter in a vulnerable state. I will never forgive you for that. You deserve what is happening to you, and I promise to do my part and take you to the cleaners. Your cheating and abusive behavior will cost you, Liam. Just wait and watch. I was so proud of my daughter for standing up for herself. She didn't even need me anymore. She was strong enough to face her abuser and tell him to get lost from her life. She was in mother bear mode and wasn't going to allow a horrible man like Liam near her innocent daughter. I was so happy to see her take control of her life. Liam stayed in the front yard, begging for forgiveness. After a while, Dante came home and scared him away. As I write this, June's divorce is already finalized. She got the house, alimony, and child support from Liam. Liam was given a nice lecture by the judge, who was furious about what he had done. Liam was a crying mess in court as no one came to support him. His own parents and siblings came, but sat with June to show their support for her. That day, Liam realized that he had finally lost it all. His mistake did cost him. I'm just happy my daughter and grandchild are doing great. Dante and I are actually getting married soon since he proposed. I never went back home. I'm now staying at Dante's house with our daughters and grandchild because this has become my home. Let's conclude the story shortly. Life went on, and June blossomed. She found her strength, her independence, and most importantly, her voice. She became a devoted mother, a loving daughter, and a fiercely independent woman. Liam, on the other hand, never recovered. He lost his job, his family's respect, and his mistress, who finally saw him for the monster he was. As for Dante and me, well, we got married. Our families blended beautifully, and our daughters became the best of friends. We found happiness in the most unexpected place, proving that even after a storm, the sun always shines again. And as for June, she finally found the courage to share her own story. She wrote a blog, detailing her experience, and it resonated with women all over the world. She became a voice for those who had suffered in silence, proving that even in the darkest moments, hope and healing can be found. Thanks for watching. How did you find the story? Let me know in the comments below. Remember to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more awesome stories like this. Your feedback and support mean a lot.
And was preparing a festive dinner to celebrate her 40th birthday, inviting only close friends and their families. Lost in thought, she stepped off the sidewalk and onto the parking lot road. Suddenly, a sharp push from behind knocked her off her feet. She fell, dropping the bags onto the asphalt and scattering their contents. She screamed in surprise and pain. "Excuse me, lady. For God's sake, I don't know how it happened. Where did you come from?" The frightened driver of the car helped her to her feet, visibly upset about what had happened. "You almost ran over me. Who even gives a driver's license to people like you?" and exclaimed, rubbing her injured hand from the fall. "Well, you should have looked around. protested the stranger, giving him a fiery look. The man lowered his tone. I'm sorry, I was wrong. Let me take you home. I'll get the groceries now. As he picked up the bags, he began collecting the scattered products. And, regaining her composure, realized she was partly to blame for the accident. She softened her tone. You're right, it's my fault. I was lost in thought. If you could give me a ride home, I'd be very grateful. My name is Matthew, the man said with a smile, extending his hand. And shook his hand, smiling in return. On the way home, she and Matthew engaged in light conversation. Your husband is lucky. He has a beautiful, smart wife, Matthew said. Unfortunately, I wasn't so lucky. My wife left me with a little daughter. That's how we live. Do you have children? Anne's expression changed at the question. The topic of children was a painful one for her. After many years of marriage, she had never managed to become a mother. Though she had no intention of discussing this with a stranger, she replied briefly, No, we don't have children. We've arrived, Matthew said as the car stopped at the high gate of a large, beautiful house. And I'm sorry if I offended you. Don't worry about it, Anne said, noticing his concern. My nerves have been frayed lately. Thank you again. And quickly unpacked the groceries and started preparing dinner. With the table set in the living room and very little time left before the guests arrived, and tried to call her husband, but he didn't answer. She sighed heavily. Lately, her husband had been staying at work late into the night, often getting irritated at her questions. He mentioned he was working on a critical project and had grown accustomed to his absences. The doorbell rang, and on the intercom screen, Anne saw Gwen and Wes smiling. They had been friends since college and were probably the only friends Anne and her husband had, as Christopher preferred to keep strangers out of their home and life, except for old friends. And you look stunning. It seems like you're forever 25, Gwen exclaimed admiringly. You're wonderful. Happy birthday, dear, Wes said, handing Anne a beautiful bouquet. And where's our hard worker? Isn't he here yet? Well, you know how it is. Urgent projects, meetings, and business, and replied. Christopher's always busy. I don't understand how you can endure such a life. You're always alone. Maybe you should consider going back to work, Gwen suggested, sensing the oppressive atmosphere in her friend's home. Wes is actually looking for a new specialist. As you know, finding a good architect is as difficult as finding a skilled surgeon. I remember you were the best in the course. And sighed. I'd be happy to, but you know Christopher is against it. Gwen hesitated for a moment, then spoke bluntly. Forgive me for saying this, but I have to speak my mind. Christopher is selfish and you're being foolish. Don't you see? He's turned you into a housekeeper while he spends his time as he pleases. It's convenient for him. Before Anne could respond, a voice called from the other room. Well, my dears, I'm glad to see you. Please come to the table. As for Christopher, I hope he can join us soon. The hostess, hoping to smooth over the tension, ushered everyone toward the festive table. Later, after the guests had eaten and reminisced about their student days, Christopher finally arrived home. He was serious, offering polite smiles to the guests, more out of courtesy than genuine joy. Christopher, you could have come earlier, Gwen said, unable to hold her tongue. We haven't seen each other for so long. And it's your wife's birthday. Where are the flowers for her? Christopher, walking into the room empty-handed, replied coldly, I'm glad to see you all, but work doesn't wait. Wes probably understands. His tone made it clear he didn't appreciate Gwen's remark. I didn't have time to buy flowers. I was in a rush. Happy birthday, and thank you, dear, Anne replied, opening the box he handed her. She smiled sadly. Christopher hadn't bothered to choose a thoughtful gift. As always, it was a piece of jewelry, and this year was no exception. The atmosphere lightened somewhat with Christopher's presence, but the constant buzzing of his phone interrupted the conversation. By the end of the evening, after bidding farewell to their friends, the house fell silent once more, and began clearing the table while Christopher remained absorbed in his phone. When the cleaning was done, she turned to him. Christopher, Don't you think that even when you're at home, you're very far from it in your thoughts? Don't nitpick. I'm working, okay? I understand, and replied quietly, holding back her tears as she made her way to the bedroom. Once inside, she allowed herself to cry. Despite being married and felt deeply lonely and unwanted. Her father had passed away when she was young, and her relationship with her stepfather had never been close. If it weren't for her friends, she would have been completely alone. And thought back to her conversation with Gwen, seriously considering the idea of going back to work. At least she could be productive and not feel so isolated. The next morning, and woke up early and noticed that Christopher wasn't in bed. A bad feeling settled in her chest. She peeked into his study and saw him sleeping on the couch, his jacket thrown over him like a blanket. Her heart sank. Something was wrong with Christopher and their marriage as a whole. After showering and getting dressed and headed downstairs, Christopher was already in the living room, sitting in a chair, staring out the window with a cup of coffee in his hands. He didn't notice his wife's presence at first. When Anne greeted him, Christopher jumped in surprise. "You've been acting strange lately. Are you okay? You slept in the office. Are you avoiding me? Is there a problem at work? What's going on?" And asked, her voice trembling with all the questions that had been weighing on her mind. Christopher sighed, his tone unnervingly calm. "We need to talk." And nodded. "Yes, I wanted to talk to you as well. I know you'll be against it, but I've decided to start working again." "I've fallen in love with another woman," Christopher interrupted, his voice flat and motionless. "She's pregnant, and we're expecting a child." Anne's vision blurred. She swayed on her feet, barely able to stand. "How long has this affair been going on?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "What does it matter?" he replied coldly. "I found out about the pregnancy yesterday, if that's what you're asking. Thank you for not ruining my birthday," and whispered bitterly as tears streamed down her face. "Let's not have any hysterics," Christopher said, clearly unaffected by her pain. "Don't you care about my feelings at all?" And asked, her voice filled with anguish. "And what about mine?" Christopher snapped. "I'm 40 years old, and all of my friends already have children. What do we have?" And gasped. "How dare you blame me for that? You know how much I've been through, how many doctors I've seen." "Stop this spectacle," Christopher said dismissively. "Why all the drama? Thousands of people get divorced and move on. I'm going to have a son, and I'm finally going to be happy. Tonight, when I come back, we'll discuss the details of the divorce." With that, Christopher slammed the door behind him, leaving and collapsed on the floor, sobbing in pain and humiliation. Christopher, meanwhile, headed straight for Ellen's apartment, the one he rented for her. He wanted to let her know that he'd finally confessed everything to and that they'd soon be divorced. He planned to make his relationship with Ellen official afterward. Using his key, he opened the door, surprised to see Ellen packing a large suitcase. "I'm home. Why isn't anyone greeting me?" Christopher asked, a smile on his face. "Are we going somewhere?" Ellen turned to him, slightly startled. "Oh, hi, darling. I didn't expect you so early. So, where are we going?" Christopher asked, wrapping his arms around her and twirling her playfully. Ellen pouted theatrically. "We're going to your beautiful country house, where your wife is currently enjoying herself," she replied with a smirk. "I mean, she has nowhere else to go right now. I assume you'll buy her an apartment." Christopher frowned. "I can't just throw Anne out onto the street. I'll find her a place, but I need time." Ellen wasn't listening. "I don't care about that. We're family now, and there are almost 3 of us. Yet we're cramped in this tiny apartment while she's living alone in luxury. Our baby needs fresh air, and we're stuck here in the city, breathing polluted air." She stroked her stomach dramatically, tears welling up for added effect. Christopher sighed. "You're probably right. Don't get upset. Don't upset our son. We'll move. I'll sort it out." Back at the house, Anne sat on the couch, stunned by her husband's betrayal. She couldn't gather her thoughts. For hours, she sat in disbelief, trying to convince herself it was all a cruel, stupid joke. Christopher will come back and say it was a prank, just a prank, she repeated to herself, like a mantra. Her phone buzzed, making her jump. She didn't want to talk to anyone, but when she saw Christopher's name on the screen, her heart raced. With shaky hands, she wiped away her tears and answered, though her throat was too tight to speak. "Are you there?" Christopher's voice came through the line. "Okay, you don't have to say anything. Listen, I found you an apartment. You need to take a look at it," Christopher said, and didn't bother to listen to the rest of his delusional speech. She simply hung up. Issues like this, she believed, should be discussed face to face, not over the phone. She brewed herself a cup of herbal tea and settled on the cozy terrace of their home. She loved this house deeply. They had bought it together when they were young, poured their hearts into it, and gradually built their lives within its walls. Now, as if none of it mattered, as if all those years together had never happened, Christopher was saying he'd found her an apartment. "Scoundrel," and hissed aloud, wiping away her tears. She tried to pull herself together, but the happy moments from their married life resurfaced, refusing to let her rest. The memories haunted her, leaving her in a broken state, unsure whether she could face the emptiness and loneliness that lay ahead. Unnoticed by Anne, evening arrived. She was still lost in thought when Christopher returned home. He found her on the terrace and wasted no time getting straight to business. "What was that?" "You hung up the phone and didn't answer my calls," he said, irritation in his voice. "We're adults. Let's part peacefully and amicably. I'm not holding you back." And stared at him, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "What do you mean, you're not holding me back? Go to your mistress if you want. I'm not leaving this house. You found me an apartment? Fine. Then you go live there. This is my home, and I'm not vacating it for her." Christopher crossed his arms, his tone firm. "In the worst case, we'll sell it and divide the money. That seems fair, don't you think?" Anne's eyes flashed with anger. "This house was bought under my mother's name, remember? It can't be sold, it's still under mortgage." Anne felt her blood boil. "Now I see why you insisted on putting the house in your mother's name. You covered your back very well, didn't you? Do you remember I sold my apartment and invested everything I had into this house?" "I remember everything," Christopher replied coldly. "That's why I'm telling you, I found you an apartment. You need to see it, then we can finalize the deal and the divorce. Stay here if you like, but remember, you have to answer for everything in this life, for everything, and you will definitely answer for the pain you've caused me," Christopher said, his voice cold. The next day, Anne went to see the apartment her husband had found for her. On the way, memories flooded her mind, how happy they had once been, how much they had struggled together to build the life they wanted, and the sacrifices she had made for him. She had given up her career to support Christopher, helping him with complex projects, and now she couldn't fathom how he could so easily replace her. The main reason for their divorce, Anne knew, was their lack of children. It was a painful subject. She had visited countless doctors, taken endless pills, and endured painful injections, all for nothing. The doctors had simply shrugged, unable to explain why, after so many years, they had no children. Christopher had never directly blamed her, but deep down, he believed the issue was with her. It broke her heart to hear him talk about Gwen and Wes and their growing son, a reminder of what they never had. Lost in thought, Anne suddenly realized she had arrived at the entrance of her new apartment. It was on the 5th floor, bright and spacious enough, though nothing like the home she had once shared with Christopher. It would do for a fresh start, but she couldn't shake the bitterness. "Where I started, I end," she muttered to herself. The next day, her suitcases were nearly packed. She had only taken what was rightfully hers. As she stood in the doorway, looking back at the house for the last time, sadness washed over her. This house, where she had invested so much, had never given her true happiness. "Christopher, what is she doing here?" a voice suddenly cried out behind her, and turned to see a young woman standing there, about 20 years younger than her, stunningly beautiful and brimming with confidence. She could have easily been Christopher's daughter. A lump formed in Anne's throat, but she composed herself. I am still in my home, darling, and replied calmly. And by the way, I'm still your lover's lawful wife. Now, what you are doing here is a good question. No shame, no conscience. Where do you people even come from? Disgusting. Turning to Christopher, she continued, I believe I told you that your mistress shouldn't be here before I left. She is not a mistress. She's the mother of my son, and stop this hysterics, it will get us nowhere. We're modern people, Christopher said, raising his voice. Very modern indeed, and laughed bitterly. Christopher, you've never understood people, and you're so very wrong now. Just look at her. There's a scrolling line on her forehead. I'm looking for a rich daddy. Christopher frowned but said nothing. Ellen rolled her eyes theatrically, her hand brushing lightly over her still flat stomach, a gesture that made and laughed softly. What's your name, girl? And asked, her voice calm but cutting. Dear Christopher, this girl is a natural actress. I'm certain the surprises in your life are just beginning. At that moment, Anne's phone pinged with an incoming SMS. Her taxi had arrived at the gate. Breathing a sigh of relief, she grabbed her 2 large suitcases and began rolling them toward the exit. Christopher watched his wife leave, a pang of sadness stirring in his heart. Something was bothering him, gnawing at his soul. For a brief moment, he considered stopping this madness, but Ellen, sensing the shift in him, quickly resumed her performance. Christopher, my dear, I'm feeling pain in my lower abdomen, Ellen complained softly. Immediately, Christopher snapped back to attention. You shouldn't worry, my love. The doctor said to rest and avoid stress, he murmured, gently guiding her to sit down, his hand tenderly on her waist. Meanwhile, Anne walked out of the home she had once adored, holding on to her dignity despite the agony in her heart. Watching her husband care so tenderly for the woman who had destroyed their family was unbearable. And what awaited Anne now? She didn't even want to imagine. Once inside the taxi, Anne finally let her tears flow freely. The driver, catching her sorrowful reflection in the rearview mirror, asked gently, Are you okay? Can I help you with something? I'm sorry, Anne replied through her tears. I just couldn't hold back anymore. My husband brought his pregnant mistress into our home, that's all. The driver, a kind older man, offered a sympathetic smile. You know, I don't think a beautiful woman like you can ever be replaced. What a fool your husband is. And wiped her eyes and sighed. I'm 40. He found himself a younger woman. The driver chuckled softly. 40? That's the perfect age to love, live, and thrive. Youth? They've got nothing but wind in their heads. Trust me, I'm 67. In my experience, everything will turn out fine for you. And when that happens, your husband will come crawling back. But by then, will you even want him? It may feel like the end of the world now, but one day, you'll look back and laugh. And was truly grateful to this kind stranger for his words. As she listened, a small seed of hope for a brighter future began to take root in her heart. In her first month at the new apartment, Anne focused on rebuilding her life. The place was spacious and comfortable, but it lacked the warmth of the home where she had spent so many years. Loneliness crept in, and the memories weighed heavy on her, but the hope planted by the driver's words kept her from falling into despair. If it weren't for her childhood friends, Gwen and Wes, Anne would have been completely lost. They supported her as best they could. Wes immediately offered her a position at his company without hesitation, and little by little, Anne settled into her new work environment. The team welcomed her warmly, and when she received her first paycheck after so many years, her joy was boundless. Gwen became a frequent visitor at Anne's new apartment while Wes, on his own accord, cut ties with Christopher. Christopher had called Wes once after the whole situation unfolded, but Wes refused to support his friend's betrayal. One night, Anne stayed late at the office, working on an urgent project that seemed impossible to finish on time. Wes had already resigned himself to the idea that the client would turn to a competitor, but Anne, drawing on everything she had learned over the years, worked tirelessly to save the project. When she finally placed the completed work on Wes's desk, she left the office, exhausted but satisfied. Outside, it was cold and damp. The the wind biting through her coat. Shivering and muttered to herself, "I should have called a taxi." As she scanned the street, she noticed the headlights of a parked car on the other side of the road. The street was empty, so she decided to take a shortcut and cross the 4-lane road. But the moment she stepped onto the asphalt, a car came speeding around the corner. The headlights blinded her, and the screech of brakes echoed in her ears. She stumbled in fright. "Are you crazy?" "Tired of living?" a man's voice shouted as he got out of the car. "It's you who's crazy. Watch where you're driving." And snapped back, fully aware it had been her mistake. The man's mocking voice was oddly familiar, but the blinding headlights prevented her from recognizing him. "Let me help you up," he offered, extending a hand. "I've got it, thanks," and said curtly, brushing off her bruised knees and hands. "I have an important presentation tomorrow, and you've ruined everything. What will the client think of me?" "You should tell them the truth, that you're a reckless person who enjoys throwing herself in front of cars," the man replied sarcastically. "You're a bore." And shot back. "But fine, I'll take your offer. You can drive me home, since you nearly ran me over. It's your responsibility now." Reluctantly, and climbed into the passenger seat. When she finally got a clear look at the driver, she gasped. "Matthew? If I remember correctly?" "Yes, it's me," the man confirmed with a grin. "I recognized you right away," and they both laughed at the coincidence of nearly being run over by the same man twice. "I remember where you live," Matthew said with a smile. Anne's expression turned somber. "A lot has changed. I don't live there anymore. I've moved to a new apartment by the South Bridge." "Really?" "We're neighbors then," Matthew said, curious. "If you don't mind me asking, why move from a house to an apartment?" "My daughter and I are dreaming of moving to a house for the fresh air." "I divorced my husband," Anne replied quietly. "He bought me the apartment, so I had no choice but to move." "I'm sorry to hear that," Matthew said, his tone sincere. "I remember you seemed so happy not long ago." "That's in the past," Anne sighed. "I couldn't have children, and his mistress got pregnant. Now they live in my house, enjoying their new life, while I'm in the apartment. That's it. I've satisfied your curiosity, so let's be quiet now. I have an important day at work tomorrow," and said, shutting down the conversation. "I'm sorry, Anne. I didn't realize it was like this," Matthew responded softly. The rest of the drive was silent, with the tension hanging in the air. When they arrived at Anne's new apartment, Matthew smiled. "We're neighbors. I live across the street. I hope this won't be the last time we meet, but maybe next time under better circumstances. Thank you for the ride," and smiled back before heading inside. That night, it took her a while to fall asleep, her mind bouncing between thoughts of the work she had done on the project and the brief connection she felt with Matthew. He was handsome, and being with him felt uncomplicated. She found herself hoping their paths would cross again soon. The next morning, Anne's eyes barely opened when she glanced at the clock. Horror. "I overslept." "Not today," she gasped. She rushed around her apartment, getting ready in record time. In just 10 minutes, she had dressed, touched up her lashes, applied a quick blush, and tied her long hair into a tight bun. "Why didn't I call a taxi earlier?" she cursed to herself, standing impatiently while waiting for one. "Good morning, neighbor," a familiar voice called from behind, and turned to see Matthew pulling up. Relief washed over her. "Matthew, help me. I'm late for a critical meeting," she cried, running toward his car. "I worked late on this project last night, and it's crucial for my future and the company's reputation. My boss says the client is extremely picky, and I'm the only one who knows the nuances. I have to convince him our project is the best fit." "Well, how can I refuse such a beautiful woman in distress?" Matthew chuckled. "Though I have an important meeting myself. It's not far from where you almost ran me over yesterday," and teased, breathless. Matthew smiled, noting how naturally beautiful she looked with minimal makeup. "All right, but I have a condition: you owe me lunch sometime." "Deal. Let's go," she laughed, hopping into the car. They reached the office just in time. and jumped out and dashed into the building, calling out a quick thank you over her shoulder. Matthew watched her disappear inside, a smile lingering on his face. Who would willingly let such a woman out of their life? he thought, shaking his head in disbelief before parking his car inside the office and practically flew in, panting. Wes, I made it. Did you check the project? I did everything I could, actually. Even more, she exclaimed, rushing to the desk. There are concerns about the construction site near the river, but I solved the flooding problem like this, she continued, grabbing a pencil and sketching out her solution on the blueprints. For a few seconds, Wes stood there, stunned. And you're a miracle. You did in one evening what my top specialists couldn't come up with in weeks. The client will be here any minute, and I'm counting on you for the presentation. Don't worry, Wes. I've got this, and reassured him, her confidence steady despite her racing heart. Sorry I'm late, came a familiar voice behind her, and froze, turning slowly. Matthew? What are you doing here? He grinned. Surprise, and it turns out I'm the picky client who kept you up working late last night. Wes tensed at first, unsure of the situation, but quickly relaxed as he saw the friendly dynamic between them. Good day, Mr. Foy, Wes greeted, extending his hand. I didn't realize you knew, and good day, Matthew replied, shaking Wes's hand. Yes, and I are friends and neighbors now. I'm sure I'll be more than pleased with her project. Shall we move forward with the presentation? The negotiations proceeded in a pleasant and productive atmosphere, and couldn't help but feel a little lighter. Here's the revised version of the passage with improved flow and clarity. Matthew was impressed by Anne's professionalism. To be honest, I approached another company with a similar question, but their project was a failure. They couldn't handle the details of seasonal flooding, but you succeeded. Anne blushed slightly. It's not just my merit. Our whole team worked hard on this project. I like everything about it, Matthew said. I'd like to invite you to the site where the house will be built. I also want to discuss a few details. Will tomorrow work for you? And glanced at Wes, who nodded encouragingly. You've done an excellent job, Anne. Congratulations. You'll lead this project to the end, Wes said with a smile. All day, Anne was in high spirits. Things were gradually improving in her life. She hardly thought about her ex-husband and the betrayal. Her feelings for Matthew were becoming more apparent, and Matthew didn't hide his growing sympathy for her. Wes, sincerely wishing her happiness, entrusted her with an important project. As Anne left the office at the end of the day, she felt a strange sense that Matthew might be nearby. What am I doing? Am I 20 years old? She asked herself, shaking her head. The next morning, as agreed, and waited for Matthew at the entrance. She was always punctual, so when she spotted Matthew in the distance, she couldn't hide her frustration. Hello, Matthew. I've been waiting for you in the rain for half an hour. Hello, Anne. I'm so sorry, Matthew said, looking worried. My daughter got sick last night. Her temperature spiked, and I didn't have your number to call you. Our trip is canceled. Anne felt a pang of guilt. I'm so sorry to hear that. Is there anything I can do to help? I need to go to the pharmacy to get medicine for her. Could you go home and I'll go to the pharmacy? If you need anything, just call me, Matthew said. Anne nodded. Sure. I'll go to the pharmacy and bring everything you need. Just give me your number. 15 minutes later, Anne returned with a bag of fruit and medicine. Take off your coat and come in, Matthew said as he helped her inside. Eva fell asleep. I made tea. You're all wet, you shouldn't get sick because of me, and was surprised by the modesty of Matthew's apartment. Given the size of the project, she expected something more lavish. However, the apartment was modest but cozy. Over tea, Matthew and talked about his daughter, Eva. She was born healthy, but a month later, doctors found a congenital heart defect. She had surgery when she was 1, and it was successful. However, a year later, she had her first asthma attack. No one has been able to cure her completely. The only advice was to get her out of the city more often to fresh air. That's why I'm building this house, Matthew continued. The location by the river is ideal for her health. You're the only one who could solve the flooding problem. Anne's curiosity was piqued. Matthew, if you don't mind me asking, what do you do for a living? It must be tough to raise a daughter alone. Matthew sighed. Yes, it's difficult. When Eva is sick, I'm apprehensive. When she's healthy, I take her to daycare and go to work. I'm a mechanic at a technical service station. I do everything myself because there's no one else to help with Eva. I'm impressed and said, "It must be a lot to handle." Matthew nodded. "It is. We're looking forward to the house being finished. My childhood friend runs a sawmill not far from the plot. He needs a good woodsman." "I've done this kind of work before." "Really? Do you understand this kind of work?" And asked, surprised. "Yes," Matthew said with a smile. "My father did it all his life." And admired his dedication and resilience. It was clear that despite the challenges, Matthew did everything he could for his daughter and future. Matthew shared more about his life as and listened with admiration. "I used to have a profitable word processing business," he said. "I grew up around here, but after my mother passed away, my father remarried and sold everything. I wasn't interested in continuing the business. I just wanted to leave for the city. My father gave me a large sum from the sale, and I used it to graduate from agricultural college. I know everything about forestry, but since my profession wasn't in demand in the city, I became a car mechanic. It's been good work, enough to support Eva and me. I still plan to leave the city eventually and do what I love." And was impressed by Matthew's story. She had never met someone so genuine and sincere, apart from Gwen and Wes. Matthew's sense of humor, simplicity, and care were endearing. His sincere eyes and smile made him even more charming. As they talked, they didn't notice Eva entering the kitchen. "Daddy, who is this lady?" the little girl asked. Matthew smiled at Eva. "Come here, sweetheart. I'll introduce you to my friend. This is Anne. She lives next door and came to help us when she heard you were sick." "Hello, Anne. I'm Eva." "Nice to meet you," Eva said, looking up at Anne with curiosity. "It's lovely to meet you, Eva. You're a very cute and beautiful girl," Anne replied, her heart warming at the girl's openness. "Do you have a daughter?" Eva asked. "Unfortunately, no," Anne said. "But I would love to have a smart daughter like you." "Well, if Eva agrees, I suggest we order pizza and watch a movie. We have a free day tomorrow," Matthew proposed. Eva's face lit up with joy. "Hooray! Will Anne join us too?" Matthew glanced at Anne, who was slightly taken aback. "If you want me, I'd be happy to join," Anne said, gently stroking Eva's unruly curls. Eva hugged Anne, leaning her head on Anne's shoulder, and felt touched by the child's warmth and sincerity. From that day forward, a true friendship blossomed between Anne and Matthew. Eva was thrilled to have Anne as a frequent guest. They spent time together playing board games, watching educational films about animals, and going to amusement parks and zoos. Months passed, and Anne could no longer imagine her life without Matthew and Eva. Likewise, Matthew and Eva couldn't imagine their lives without Anne. The house construction was progressing quickly. Wes entrusted Anne with another complex project, which she managed brilliantly. The team now sought her advice on difficult matters, and she was always willing to help. One day, Wes arrived at the office looking unusually troubled. Anne noticed this and decided to check in on him. "May I come in?" she asked, knocking on his office door and holding a cup of coffee. "Of course, Anne. You're always welcome," Wes said with a forced smile. "Is everything okay? You seem upset." "Yes, you're right," Wes admitted. "Remember Christopher? He gave me some money a while ago. He's now having trouble with his business and other issues. Ellen has just had a son, and Christopher is demanding the money back sooner than expected. That's not all. He asked me to tell you that he won't pay the loan for your apartment anymore. He's got his own family now." Anne's heart sank as she processed the news. The uncertainty of her living situation now weighed heavily on her. "Yeah, it was to be expected," Anne said with a resigned sigh. "I should have known." It was surprising that the property was bought on credit, but Christopher promised to keep up with the payments. "Once again, I believed him, and once again, he let me down." Wes shook his head. "I can't believe he'd do this to you after everything. You sold your apartment and invested every penny in the house he now shares with another woman." I wanted to confront him, but he refused to meet. He said I should just transfer the money to his account and that we had nothing more to discuss. It's infuriating. I'll pay back my debt within a week, Anne said firmly. I don't understand how he could do this. But the apartment is in my name, and I'm earning well. I have a great boss. I'll manage. You're not alone in this, Wes reassured her. Gwen and I are here for you. Your efforts have greatly enhanced our company's reputation. That's why I'm giving you a well-deserved raise. Anne's eyes lit up with gratitude. Thank you, Wes. Can I leave early today? Everything at work is wrapped up. I need to stop by the store. Today's my birthday, and Matthew and I have picked out a gift. We just need to collect it. You and Matthew picked out a gift together? That sounds serious, Wes said with a smile. Is everything okay? I think it is, Anne replied. I've decided to trust fate. If it's giving me a second chance, then Matthew is a good person, and Eva is a sweetheart. They've truly brought joy back into my life. You deserve every bit of happiness, Wes said warmly. I'm glad Gwen and I can be here for you. Otherwise, I don't know how you would have managed. You've come so far. A year later, Wes admired the newly completed house. You did an impressive job. The house looks amazing, and your flood prevention measures are perfect. When are you planning to move in? Anne, her round belly gently caressed, looked at Matthew with happiness in her eyes. We'll move in once everything inside is finished. For now, we've decided to stay in the city until the baby is born. Great job, everyone, Wes said with enthusiasm. I'm thrilled for you and your new family. Wes, I never imagined a person could be so happy, and said, smiling. Matthew, you've shown such kindness. I truly appreciate everything. I'm excited about starting this new chapter. Wes chuckled. Don't hesitate to ask for help. I'll always be here for you. Anne's family is my family, and that's our rule. Thank you, Wes. I'll need your help as I dive into woodworking. I'm like a fish in water with this business, and soon I'll be setting up production locally. That's wonderful to hear, Wes said. But remember, I won't let Anne go. You and Gwen have been such a support. I cherish our friendship, and I enjoy working with you. Money isn't an issue. All right, enough about business, Wes said with a laugh. Let's go see Gwen and the kids. They're probably missing us. When they arrived home, they saw the children playing with a ball and Gwen setting the table. She had prepared a delicious treat, and felt a sense of contentment as she realized that her life, though once tumultuous, was gradually improving. The apartment issue was resolved, and with the support of her friends, she was looking forward to a bright future. Thanks to the lawyer Wes hired, Anne was able to pay off the mortgage on the property with her earnings. 6 months after they met, she married Matthew, and Eva was thrilled to have a new mom, just like her friends. The bond between Anne, Matthew, and Eva grew stronger, and Anne felt deeply grateful for her new family. They shopped for baby items together and eagerly anticipated the arrival of their little one. One day, when Matthew was out of town, Anne went for a routine appointment at the women's clinic. Gwen kindly agreed to look after Eva, especially since her son Tommy was eager to play with his new friend. After leaving the clinic, Anne was in high spirits. The baby was developing well, and there were no complications despite her age. She decided to stop by the mall to buy toys for Eva and Tommy. However, a troubling encounter awaited her at the shopping center. She came face to face with her ex-husband, Christopher. His shock was evident as he froze upon seeing Anne's pregnant belly. And how? Christopher stammered, his surprise palpable. Hello, Christopher. It's none of your business, Anne replied coldly. I heard you had a son. Congratulations. I'd say it's good to see you, but it's not. Goodbye. Without waiting for a response, Anne walked away, leaving Christopher staring after her. Back home, Christopher's young son rushed to greet him, while Ellen sat on the couch, engrossed in her phone. Hi, Ellen, are we having dinner? Christopher asked as he entered. Ellen glanced at him with irritation. I asked you to transfer money to my card. Did you forget? Is that all you have to say? Christopher asked, feeling frustrated. You've been acting strange lately. Is everything okay? I'm not acting strange, Ellen snapped. I just don't like being ignored. This isn't a request, it's a demand. I need to update my wardrobe. I don't want to look like I'm from the past. Shut up, Christopher retorted. Don't talk about Anne. You're not worth her little finger. if it weren't for our son. Before Christopher could finish, he walked away to the playroom with the baby. Ellen, realizing she had overstepped, headed to the kitchen to prepare dinner. Christopher tried to calm down by focusing on his son, but the doubts gnawing at him remained. The child had mentioned having ice cream and playing with his uncle, which puzzled Christopher. That night, Christopher couldn't stop thinking about Anne. He remembered how well she looked and how pregnancy suited her. The realization that she was happy with someone else drove him mad. He was overwhelmed by a sudden wave of jealousy. The next day, Christopher addressed Ellen as he was leaving for work. "I've sent the money you asked for. Update your wardrobe," he said, attempting to mask his discontent. Ellen smiled brightly and leaped into her husband's arms. "My dear, thank you. I love you so much," she said. Christopher gently pushed her away and left for work. That day, he didn't go to the office. Instead, he decided to follow Ellen to see if she would truly go shopping as she claimed. To his dismay, he discovered her deception. As soon as Ellen and their son left the house, Christopher trailed them discreetly. His suspicion was piqued when Ellen drove to a residential area and parked in front of a 10-story building. He watched from a distance as she entered the building carrying their son. Hours passed, and Ellen didn't return until late in the evening, leaving the building with a young man who carried Christopher's son on his shoulders. Christopher's anger simmered beneath the surface, but he stayed hidden, determined to uncover the truth. Meanwhile, Matthew and Anne were settling into their new dream home, which was finally complete. They planned to spend the weekend there with their friends, Wes and Gwen. Matthew, "I'm just going to my apartment to water the flowers," and said, "We won't be here for a few days. Can you manage without me?" "Of course," Matthew replied. "I'll take Eva with me. It'll be faster." Eva eagerly helped her mother water the flowers, humming a tune to entertain Anne. A knock at the door caught their attention. Eva ran to answer it but hesitated when she heard a stranger's voice. She called for Anne. Anne peered through the peephole and was surprised to see Christopher standing outside. "What are you doing here?" Anne asked as she opened the door. "We need to talk," Christopher said earnestly. "I'm sorry for everything I did to you. Please, let's start over." Anne looked at Eva and said gently, "Eva, why don't you check if we watered all the flowers? I need to talk to this person for a few minutes." Eva nodded and went off to inspect the flowers. "Christopher, are you out of your mind?" Anne said, her voice firm. "I have a different life now. I'm expecting a child with my beloved." Christopher's eyes filled with regret. "I realize now what I lost. Ellen lied to me. She had a son with another man, and I've been paying for her betrayal. I'm divorcing her. I'm all alone now. Please come back to me. I'll love your child as my own." And shook her head. "Christopher, let's be honest. I was a faithful wife. You destroyed everything. The fact that we didn't have children wasn't my fault. You got what you deserved. It's come back to you like a boomerang. Leave and never come back." Christopher's face fell in despair. As he turned to leave, Matthew arrived, having overheard the conversation. "Dear, you and Eva were gone for a while, so I decided to check on you," Matthew said. He then turned his attention to Christopher. "And what are you doing here?" "I bought this apartment," Christopher replied, trying to salvage the situation. Matthew looked at him sternly. "Well, that's an unfortunate coincidence. Please leave." Christopher, defeated, walked away, leaving Anne and Matthew to their renewed peace and happiness. Christopher's face turned pale with regret. "I have the right," he said weakly. Anne's eyes flashed with disappointment. "Oh, what a wretch you are. This apartment belongs to my wife and only to her. Have you forgotten what it means to be a man? What rights do you dare to claim here?" Matthew cut him off sharply. "Christopher, it's better for you to leave. It's all over." Christopher's shoulders slumped as a tear rolled down his cheek. He was overwhelmed with the realization of his loss and how he had destroyed everything himself. Slowly, he turned and made his way to the exit. At the doorstep, he paused and said quietly, "Forgive me, and you." He turned to Matthew. "Take care of her. There is no one like Anne in the whole wide world. Don't worry. I won't miss my chance at happiness," Matthew replied coldly, closing the door behind Christopher. Matthew turned to Anne. "Are you okay?" "Yes, everything is fine," Anne said, closing her eyes with relief as she was enveloped in Matthew's embrace. "It's time for us," Matthew called to Eva. The three of them, filled with happiness, left the building together. Outside, Christopher sat alone in his car, gripping the steering wheel tightly. He watched Anne and her family disappear from view, knowing he would never have her again. 3 years later, a group of happy people gathered on the bank of the river in their cozy paradise. Matthew and Wes were busy at the barbecue while Tommy helped Eva teach their younger brother how to ride a three-wheeled bike. And Gwen lounged by the riverbank, watching their loved ones. "I look at my family and can't believe how happy I am," Gwen said. "It's scary to even imagine how I would have lived without them." "I don't think it could have been any other way." "You deserve your happiness," Gwen replied. "Don't be offended, but I even envy you in a good way. Every day spent together is like a honeymoon. You loved, and he can move mountains and more for you." "Yes, Gwen, you're right. It feels like wings sprout from my back." Matthew is a great man. His production is booming, and by the way, I'm almost finished with your dream house project. We'll live nearby and see each other more often, Anne said joyfully. "Girls, the meat is ready. Let's eat while it's hot," Matthew called out. Wes looked at the approaching women, excitement evident on his face. "Matthew, we're lucky to have them." Matthew turned around, smiling at the beautiful and cheerful women in front of him. He thanked fate for everything in his life, for both the bad and the good. He knew now what real family, joy, and love were. The life of the deceived woman had changed fundamentally in a moment when she least expected it. Nothing happens for no reason. Every meeting is for something. It's important to recognize the signs of fate to avoid missing happiness. Every day, Anne watched her beloved husband Matthew play with the children and listen to their happy laughter. She thanked God for the chance at a happy and carefree future. She loved and was loved, and now she knew for sure that life could be started anew, even at 40.
Helen and her husband were returning from the city where his parents lived. The husband liked to visit them, but since they lived far away, the couple did not go there very often. Benjamin went out to pay for gasoline at a gas station, and Helen sat in the car and looked out the window, watching the raindrops slowly sliding down the glass. The woman was very sad at the thought that she and her husband had been living together for 25 years, but recently their relationship had become much worse. Helen did not understand what caused it, because before they loved each other and together found a way out of any situation, and then suddenly something broke between them. The woman remembered the person Benjamin had been before, a jolly, kind, reliable, and always ready to help. Now she saw a sullen, serious, and almost alien person in front of her. Perhaps the reason was a change of her husband's job. When Benjamin was promoted to a senior position, his work took up a lot of time and the family gradually faded into the background. Helen never resented her husband because he dreamed of a promotion so that his family did not need anything. But in her heart, she was anxious. But paradoxically, money did not bring the happiness she and her husband had when he was a junior manager. The only thing that made Helen happy was that she and Benjamin had raised two beautiful daughters, Angela and Molly. Angela was already a student and lived in another state, while Molly went abroad for an internship a few years ago, married a man, and was expecting her first child. Except for her husband's cool attitude, a better life couldn't have been wished for. Benjamin returned to the car and interrupted her memories. Irritated, he slammed the door, and they drove away in the direction of the house. Helen again stared out the window and sunk into her thoughts. She had been a housewife all her married life, taking care of the house and a husband and raising her daughters. Benjamin believed that his wife should not work and therefore always fully provided for her. But lately, when their relationship soured, the woman had almost no money of her own. They went shopping together, and it was always her husband who paid for it. Helen could not remember the last time she bought something for herself. Her best friend, Nora, repeatedly advised her to find at least a part-time job, but her husband was adamantly against it. Helen felt that Benjamin was afraid to stay without the comfort of home, because if she went to work, the house would not be so clean, and in the evening, a delicious dinner would not be waiting for him. She often offered him the option of finding a small part-time job so she could do everything, but the result was the same. The husband usually became angry and forbade her to talk about it. And now, under the influence of her memories and pangs of longing, the woman decided to talk about it again. "Benjamin, let's talk. I know you don't like the idea, but I have to go to work," calmly said Helen. "Are you starting it again? What's wrong with you at home? If you need money, tell me how much, and I'll give it to you right away," got angry Benjamin. "I do not want to constantly ask and remind that I also need to dress, buy makeup, or be able to go with friends to a cafe. I want to earn my own," firmly said Helen. "But I do not want everyone to say that the wife of such a successful man like me is working a low-paying job. Who cares about that now? These aren't the times," Helen tried to object. But Benjamin drove silently, making it clear that the conversation was over. They drove the rest of the way in silence. When they arrived home, the scandal erupted with renewed vigor. "Look, your best friend's wife works as a salesman," Helen gave an example. "Are you crazy? You don't appreciate anything. Think about it. There are many women who want your place. Everyone just wants to sit at home and do nothing." "Are you saying I do nothing? I've been running around this house like a horse all morning, picking up your socks, doing laundry, cooking, dusting. I have too much to do around the house, and I'm tired of being just a housewife. I miss socializing with people. I'm glad to go to the store because there I can talk to somebody." "I told you everything. If you go to work, I'll divorce you immediately. Stop bringing up this topic. I'm fed up already, honestly." Benjamin looked at his wife menacingly one more time and then left the dining room. Left alone, Helen was thinking tiredly again. She already doubted whether her husband really loved her, whether there was anything left of his former feelings. Their wedding anniversary was approaching, and Helen wanted to celebrate the occasion in a restaurant, but Benjamin decided otherwise. By his opinion, it would be better and easier to invite family and friends to their house, and he did not even think about the fact that Helen would have to cook for such a big company for the whole day. All he wanted to do was brag about his house and what a hostess Helen was. The woman felt tired of being alone and lacked companionship. Her best friend, Nora, moved to another city. They rarely saw each other. Her husband was no longer interested in her, and her children had left their home, and the only hope she had was to get a job. Soon it was anniversary day. Their daughters came to celebrate. The eldest was with her husband, and the youngest with her boyfriend. Helen was happy that at least for a few days she could forget about her loneliness. The woman chatted cheerfully with her daughters in the kitchen as they prepared the celebratory dinner and listened with interest to how busy their lives had been. But the daughters could not help but notice that the mother was troubled. They had long suspected that their parents' relationship had soured, but when they arrived for their anniversary, they realized that their fears were real. "Mom, what's going on with you and Dad?" Angela asked excitedly. "What are you talking about, honey? We're fine," Helen said quietly, trying to remain calm. "Are you sure? I think there's something you're not telling me." "If you won't tell me, I'll talk to Daddy," Helen protested. But it was difficult to change Angela's mind. She was determined to talk to her father about the situation because she believed that her mother did not deserve such treatment. Benjamin, on the other hand, was reverent toward his daughters and diligently portrayed himself as a caring husband. He constantly hugged his wife, showered compliments, and even gave her a huge bouquet of flowers. Helen was happy. She thought that her husband was influenced by the conversation with his daughter and that now everything would be fine. But when the daughters left, Helen's happiness melted away without a trace. The woman realized that it was just a play and that they would never be like before. Benjamin returned to his usual frame of mind, and the expression on his face did not bode well for her. "Why are you telling our girls about our relationship? Are you trying to turn them against me?" said the man angrily. "I didn't tell them anything. Angela guessed it herself, that you and I have difficulties," said Helen confusedly. "Never dare to say anything bad to them about me. You're always making me uncomfortable." Helen was upset, and Benjamin rose abruptly from the sofa and, slamming the door, left the house. He returned toward nightfall. The couple did not speak, and in silence went to their rooms. Helen could not sleep and kept thinking about what to do and how they would live together. They would never be able to become a couple again, but divorce really frightened her, because then she would be all alone. And the woman had no idea what she would do then. Because she still had feelings for Benjamin, she decided to try a last attempt to restore at least some kind of peace between them. But no matter how much she cared about Benjamin, he only responded with aggression, gradually distanced himself completely, and even stopped coming home. Helen slipped further and further into the abyss of loneliness. One day while shopping, she overheard a conversation between two cashiers that changed her life dramatically. One of the women was telling her that her acquaintance had opened a new hotel downtown, and now she was looking for maids. Helen suddenly realized that this was her chance to try to change something in her life. She timidly apologized for inadvertently overhearing the conversation, said she was just looking for work, and asked for the number of the hotel manager. After receiving the required number, Helen thanked the woman and went out into the street. Her heart was beating frantically, and she could not believe that she was going to go against the will of her husband. To avoid unnecessary scandals, Helen decided not to say anything to him, though even the thought of deceit disgusted her. But there was no other way out. In order not to change her mind, the woman immediately called from the car and arranged a meeting at the hotel tomorrow to discuss all questions of her employment. The hotel hostess said goodbye, and Helen stood for some time, happily smiling. She was overwhelmed with emotion. At last, something would change in her life. In the morning, she was afraid that her plans might be ruined, but her boss, Veronica, turned out to be a wonderful woman, and Helen's fears vanished from the heart. Veronica told the woman all the details of the work, the rate of pay, and the rules of conduct with the guests. Helen nodded happily and immediately went to work. At first, it was unusual and difficult, but then the woman managed, as she had planned, to do all the work and take care of the house. And it was easy to keep the secret, because her husband paid little attention to her and could not notice changes in her behavior and mood. Meanwhile, Helen's mood improved considerably. The woman enjoyed her life to the fullest. She liked her work, her salary was paid weekly, and her co-workers were wonderful. Several wonderful months passed that way. The woman was so happy that even her husband's rude attitude did not upset her anymore. On one of her weekends, when her husband left on another business trip, Helen decided to devote a day to herself and go shopping, then cook something delicious. But when she returned from shopping, her boss asked her to relieve her colleague who had fallen ill. Helen saw no problem and agreed. After a while, Helen received a complaint from one of the rooms she handled. Guests complained about dust in the room and the lack of drinks in the minibar. The woman rushed to fix the problems. When she entered the room, she did not see anyone and only heard the noise of pouring water. She began to dust and make the bed, and when she had finished, she saw a young woman in her 20s with wet hair. Her body was wrapped in a bath towel. The woman was indignant and showed her displeasure, demanding to be treated as a regular customer. Helen listened in silence, smiling politely. The young woman wanted to say something else, but then a voice came out of the bathroom, and Helen would have recognized it from 1,000 others. "Honey, don't be so rude to the staff. I think they all understood." "Helen? What are you doing here?" Dazed, Benjamin spoke and froze on the spot. "Hello, my darling. How was your business trip?" Helen sarcastically remarked. She was unbearably painful, but she tried not to cry, so as not to show weakness in front of this man unworthy of her tears. Benjamin was clearly shocked. He in no way expected to see Helen here, and the only thing he could say in justification was that the young woman was his colleague. "Do you take showers with all your colleagues?" asked Helen, looking at her husband's wet hair and bathrobe. Benjamin tried to grab her arm, but Helen ripped her arm out, threw a rag at her spouse, and left the room. The young mistress watched with a grimace of displeasure at her lover's unsuccessful attempts to hold on to his wife. Then she quickly dressed and tossed him goodbye, all what she thought of him, and left the room. Cursing after her, Benjamin did not try to catch up with her. Now he cared only about Helen. Her behavior surprised and greatly enraged him. Helen went to the boss's office and, after explaining the whole situation, asked to let her go home. Veronica was a very tactful and understanding woman, so she let Helen go and gave her a few days off. And at home there was a huge scandal waiting for Helen. Benjamin knew very well that the best defense is an attack, and so he played the extreme dissatisfaction that his wife deceived him so cleverly and went against his will. Helen, on the other hand, in a crystal calm rage, reproached her husband for adultery, and even with a woman younger than their daughter. "Benjamin, we're getting a divorce," the woman said firmly, finally. "Who needs you? Don't make me laugh. You'll stay alone and beg me to come back," Benjamin yelled angrily. "I'll be fine. You'll see." Benjamin, having calmed down a little, tried to appeal to Helen's mind, and even promised to improve their relationship, not yet believing that his wife was capable of leaving him. He had almost begged Helen and assured her that he did not need anyone but her, but the woman was adamant. Soon the couple divorced. They exchanged the house they had built together in the hope that it would become a cozy family home for them, and Helen got her own separate apartment. Sometimes Benjamin made attempts to reconcile with his ex-wife, but Helen hated even seeing him, much less talking to him. He finally realized that he would never meet a better woman, but it was already too late. Sometimes Helen shared her worries over the phone with her friend Nora, the one who had moved to another city several years before. Nora was always trying to support her, and one day she had a wonderful idea. In her city, she unexpectedly met their classmate Paul, who had also recently divorced, and she decided that he and Helen should meet again. They had been friends once when they were young, but then their paths parted. Nora invited a friend to come and visit her, and Helen, who was just on vacation, agreed. Nora did not let the woman get bored, and one day arranged for a meeting between Helen and Paul. Helen did not immediately recognize this handsome, positive person as a friend of her youth. They quickly found a common language, and Helen couldn't help noticing to herself that Paul's age suits him extremely well, and that he hadn't changed at all in his soul. Soon, Helen and Paul realized that they were strongly attracted to each other. Back in his youth, he had been in love with her and even wanted to open his feelings to her. But when he heard that she was getting married, he decided to disappear from her life. And now, a quarter of a century later, he had a new chance to conquer this beautiful woman. Helen hesitated at first to reciprocate Paul's feelings. After a brief visit, she left, but she kept thinking about him. She was both sad that she had not stayed with Paul, and at the same time ashamed that she had moved so quickly away from the separation with her husband, fearing the condemnation of her daughters and friends. But daughters were on her side and advised not to think what people say and just try to be happy. Meanwhile, Paul was not going to give up. He came to Helen to convince her to give him a chance. The woman could not refuse him, and she had never regretted it. She felt like a beloved woman again, and she responded to Paul in the same way. Soon they got married, inviting only the closest people to the wedding. Helen was happy to have found a man with whom she was ready to go through life together.
Welcome to the Retaliation Realm channel. We hope you enjoy today's story. My name is Lydia, a 26-year-old single woman without a full-time job. Since middle school, I've tended to keep to myself quite a bit. I did go to high school but ended up dropping out, so I only have a middle school education. Since then, I've been living with my parents, working part-time jobs, and taking on work from online postings. I have an older brother named Marcus, who's 3 years older than me. He's the opposite of me, good at sports, with lots of friends, and the so-called outgoing type. Marcus didn't want people to know he had a sister like me. He never brought friends home, and even if I happened to run into him and his friends at the convenience store, he'd ignore me. I thought it couldn't be helped and considered it someone else's problem. Once Marcus started college and moved out to live on his own, I stopped worrying about such things. Then there was talk of my Marcus getting married. He would be turning 29, so it wasn't surprising. Later, it was decided that Marcus would bring his fiancée to our parents' house. Since I was home that day, I decided to join them. "Dad, Mom, I'm home," I announced as my Marcus arrived on time. When he saw me sitting with our parents, he looked confused for a moment. Sorry to intrude, his fiancée entered the house, seemingly unaware of Marcus's attitude. Then, looking at me, she said, "Hi," and looked puzzled. I could tell from her eyes that she was asking Marcus about me. Who is this? He probably hadn't told her about me. "Thank you for coming all this way. I'm James's mother, and this is his father." My mother introduced only herself and my father. The fiancé seemed satisfied and bowed politely but still looked puzzled. My father didn't follow up on my behalf. My parents have always been harsh with me, who couldn't live up to my accomplished Marcus. When we were young, they'd say things like, "Your Marcus can do it, why can't you?" as if it was part of our education. But it changed as we grew older. Eventually, I was even called a money-sucking leech. It seemed that my parents were planning to ignore me at this meeting too. "I'll go and get some more drinks." As my mother stood up to leave, she whispered in my ear, "Why are you here? Go back to your room." I had attended this meeting because I wanted to get along with my family in my way, but it seemed to have backfired. Still, I couldn't just leave, so I stayed put. My Marcus's fiancée introduced herself as Emma. She was the same age as me, 26, but a beautiful woman with a refined atmosphere, giving off a vibe that I shouldn't casually talk to her. My Marcus seemed a bit annoyed. He probably didn't like me being there. He introduced the woman to our father and mother, but he didn't talk to me at all. It felt like I was a ghost. When the conversation about the marriage was over, casual chatter naturally started, but Marcus still acted like I didn't exist. Then James asked, "What do you usually do, Lydia?" Before I could answer, my Marcus interrupted, "Wait. Emma, you don't need to talk to her," he said. Emma looked a bit surprised. "That's right, don't worry about it," my mother said. "Yeah, don't worry about it. She's just a stranger with a blood relation," my father said. When my father said that, something inside me ended. A stranger, huh? I thought so. Reconciliation was impossible from the start. That's how the meeting ended, as if it didn't matter whether I was there or not. Soon after, Marcus and Emma got married and started building a house to live in together. My Marcus works at a famous company after graduating from college. He's still in his 20s, but his income seems good. Emma is going to be a stay-at-home wife and has already quit her job. Around the time Marcus's house was completed, we received an invitation to a housewarming party. It would be held with a limited number of guests, including Emma's relatives and Marcus's bosses. My mother was anxious, saying, "Oh, it's already finished, time flies. We need to prepare a housewarming gift. What should we get?" My father said, "We're family, so it doesn't have to be anything fancy," and he casually turned over the invitation. Only my father and mother's names were on the invitation, my name wasn't there. My mother seemed to have noticed but asked, "Lydia is coming too, right?" I wondered what she meant at the meeting. They had introduced me in such a horrible way. "It's fine if I'm not invited," I declined, but my mother insisted, "No, you're coming. I'll make arrangements." So, I ended up going to the party. On the day of the party, it suddenly started raining. My parents and I took a taxi to Marcus's house. Marcus and his wife didn't come out to the front yard because of the rain to welcome their guests at the entrance. As soon as we arrived at Marcus's house, my mother said to me, "You pay for the taxi," and got out of the car with my father first, without umbrellas. They both hurried toward the entrance. So, that's why. I thought. There was quite a distance between Marcus's house and ours. I thought it was extravagant to take a taxi. I was the one called to pay for the car. After I paid, I ran towards the entrance, and Emma asked me, "Who are you?" I had only met Emma once before, maybe she had forgotten me. I thought so and introduced myself, "I'm Lydia, James's sister." But she said with a smile, "Aw, the high school dropout. Neat. We didn't invite the parasite living off a parent," Emma said casually with a smile. My Marcus, who had just returned from showing someone in, came out too. He said to me with disdain, "Why are you here?" "Hey James, I told you not to invite her." "Why is she here?" "Well, I don't know either." My Marcus didn't want to invite me after all, and Emma changed her attitude once she knew about me. She's worse than my Marcus and parents. Would it have been better if I didn't come? I asked Marcus cautiously. "Yeah, I'm a stranger because of my low education." Not finishing high school doesn't even count as an education, right? Could you please leave the property quickly? Emma followed up on what Marcus said like she was siding with him, her expression remaining calm the whole time, which was truly terrifying. Understood. I turned on my heel. The taxi from earlier was gone, and since we weren't on the main street, it seemed difficult to find another one. I didn't have an umbrella. I trudged along, getting drenched in the rain. I could hear Emma's laughter from behind. After a while, I returned home. My parents came back looking like they had a good time. They saw my face and asked, "Why did you leave suddenly? Couldn't even call a taxi for the way back." "You're so useless," my mother complained, as if it were a matter of course. "Sorry, I suddenly had a stomachache," I lied to cover it up. "For such a reason you left on your own. You're hopeless. Make sure to give the gift later, you're an adult," my father told me. Speaking of which, I had prepared something to give at the party, but I brought it back without giving it. I wanted to send it by mail, but I didn't know the address. I could ask my parents, but the atmosphere was awkward, so I contacted my Marcus. "I want to send a gift, can you tell me the address?" This was the only reply from Marcus. "I don't give my address to strangers." I let out a sigh. Is it really fun to exert dominance over me in private, not just embarrassing to introduce to others? I couldn't help but be amazed. It might not be just my Marcus who's sending these messages, maybe Emma is also typing and laughing out loud. Either way, it's ridiculous. I gave up on sending a congratulatory gift with the meaning of Marcus and his wife at their housewarming party. I decided to leave home, realizing I couldn't get along with my family anymore, and opted to live on my own. While I didn't have a full-time job, I had some savings from my part-time work, allowing me to rent a room for myself. Since it wasn't much to live on, I decided to try streaming videos in my spare time. I was already interested in watching streams as a hobby and was adept at identifying trends among popular streamers and ways to increase views. When I started doing it myself, I began making tens of thousands a month, with the amount growing to cover my living expenses. I then decided to invest the surplus money, and the investments went well. Eventually, I ventured into running a small company, importing and selling goods. I found myself busy in a fulfilling way every day. Unlike living at home, I didn't have a family complaining about my computer use. A few months later, I received a call from my parents, who hadn't contacted me since I left home. "We want you to help James financially," they said. "Why?" I asked, genuinely curious. I wondered what could have happened to the person who had just built a new house. My parents slowly began to explain the situation. My Marcus held frequent parties after building his new house, interacting with various people such as bosses, executives, clients, and Emma's acquaintances. Among them, someone proposed an investment opportunity, and Marcus ended up trusting the proposal. He wasted a large sum of money, lured by the promise of making big returns in just a few months. I was amazed. Marcus had a decent job, so if he had just kept working hard, he wouldn't have made such a mistake. "Who is the person who recommended the investment? Isn't it a scam?" I asked. "No, it's not. It's one of Emma's acquaintances," my parents replied, seeming to completely trust Emma. "How much do you need?" She was shocked when I asked. It was an amount that a company employee couldn't easily pay. "Is that the amount my Marcus needs as a loan?" I asked my parents hesitantly, and as expected, they gave me the answer. I feared we were also introduced to the same investment. My parents hesitated before responding. "I can't come up with that much money so easily, sorry." I tried to hang up the phone, but they clung on, saying, "We're your real family, help us out in times like these." Real family. Too little, too late. "Sorry, but I'm busy, and I'm a stranger to you, right?" With that, I hung up the phone. Later on, somehow they found out, and my parents and Marcus's families showed up at the location, the office of the company I run. I was in a business meeting at the time. My secretary informed me, "There are guests here for you, President." "I don't have any other appointments." "Who are they?" I shuddered. I apologized to the business partner I was meeting with and excused myself for a moment. When I went to the reception area, there stood my pregnant sister-in-law Emma, my Marcus, and my parents. "You're running a company, huh?" "Well, it's much smaller than where I work." Marcus smirked and looked around the office. "Who are you?" I asked, pretending I didn't know them. "What's with the attitude?" My Marcus shouted, losing his temper. My mother intervened and explained, "We talked about this before, but we need your support. You're running a company, so you can help us out, right?" My mother shamelessly asked for money, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. "Yeah, it's an important time for our family. Emma is about to give birth, and the child's growth isn't good, so we need to see a good doctor." "Please, Lydia," my father and Emma chimed in, acting as if it was my duty to pay off everyone's debts. Employees occasionally walked by the reception area, glancing over with concern, wanting to get rid of them as quickly as possible. I said, "Please leave, you're causing a disturbance," I firmly stated. My Marcus exploded with anger again. "What? Are we a disturbance? We came all the way here, and that's how you talk to your family," he yelled. The employees passing by stopped in their tracks, facing them. My Marcus started to make a scene. "Do you all know this girl dropped out of middle school? She was a shut-in, no NEET, he seemed intent on humiliating me if I didn't give him the money. However, the employees responded with words Marcus didn't expect. "We know, everyone knows." The president's background. "Me too." The president hires many people from similar situations. "Is there a problem?" My Marcus, who usually socializes only with highly educated and high-income people, seemed caught off guard and stammered, Instead, my father said, "What a pathetic company, just a gathering of needs." My Marcus chimed in, "Exactly, companies that do business with a place like this can't be any good either." He yelled loudly. At that moment, the president of the company I was meeting with, who had been waiting in the reception room, came out. He must have heard the shouting. My Marcus's face went blank and then turned pale as he looked at the man. He lowered his gaze. "What's wrong, James?" Emma asked Marcus. "Idiot, don't say my name," he muttered. My Marcus whispered to Emma, but it was too late. "James? James, oh, it's you." The company president walked straight up to Marcus and looked at his face. "You're the guy who always falls, Mr. Long, the division manager, right? We owe a lot to your company." His company was also a client of Marcus's company. My Marcus was sweating profusely from every pore on his face. I guess I'm not memorable since we're not a big company." When the president threw my Marcus's words back at him, my Marcus went, "Oh," and froze up. My father, mother, and Emma also sensed the trouble and fell silent. I apologized to the president again, ignoring them. "I'm sorry for taking up your valuable time. I'll ask them to leave." "Oh, are you sure?" "I have time today, so I don't mind waiting. You can prioritize talking with your family." "No, they're not my family." I glanced at my parents and Marcus's family as I said this, "They're strangers." After that, my parents and Marcus's family were kicked out of the company. Maybe they were stunned by the exchange with the company president, but they left quietly. As for how my job was exposed, I was curious, so I looked into it and found out that Emma was the cause. She had a friend. There was a young woman in her 20s who was well informed about investment-related information and always had her antenna up. She was making a name for herself as a talented trader and company owner. Emma was surprised when she saw a photo in the media and realized that this woman was her husband's sister, who she had heard was a middle school dropout. Meeting Emma told my Marcus and parents about this and suggested they ask me for money. Since I was busy during the day and didn't answer the phone, and I didn't call them back after they asked me for money, they came to my company. I had been treating them like strangers, so I decided not to get involved with them anymore. But I couldn't help but look into Emma. I was curious about her friend's involvement in my parents' and Marcus's financial failures. That friend was Emma's ex-boyfriend. They seemed to still be involved. By the way, the child in Emma's womb wasn't my Marcus's but the child of that investor. My Marcus was devastated. It's natural to be upset since everything had been a lie. Furthermore, it seems she had been extracting money from several other men under the guidance of her ex-boyfriend. Of course, Marcus and Emma ended up getting a divorce. Emma is now under police custody along with her ex-boyfriend. However, the lost money won't be returned anytime soon. Ever since the incident at my company, Marcus's position at his workplace worsened. In his 20s, he was transferred to a so-called Windows side department and eventually resigned. Possibly irritated by the financial failure and trouble surrounding Marcus, my father got into trouble when the president witnessed him losing his temper with a subcontractor at work. After investigating his work attitude, he was fired. He had been saying things like junior high or high school graduates are worthless and if you didn't graduate from a certain university or higher, you're not a real person, similar to what he used to say to me. Both my Marcus and father ended up losing their jobs. The family, or rather a former family, whose income decreased, still contacts me, saying, "Let's live together." By the way, I had them banned from entering my company's building, so they can't force their way in anymore. With everything that happened, we're still family, right? The unemployed trio tries various tactics to cling to me, but my answer is always the same: I don't know you, you're strangers to me. I have no intention of giving any other response in the future. Thank you for being with us and listening until the end. If you found it interesting, please subscribe, give us a like, and leave your comments. We'll see you on the Retaliation Realm channel.
Well, aren't you lucky? I've eliminated the smell of poverty for you, so you should be grateful, she sneered, the words dripping with venom. Champagne splashed across my face with a forceful impact. This occurred as I stepped into the room to greet my fiancé's family. Far from being concerned about me, Ryan burst into loud, mocking laughter. I quickly realized that my carefully styled hair and the expensive clothes I'd chosen were all for nothing. All I felt was a crushing emptiness. I will therefore terminate our contract with your company, I declared, my voice steady despite the shock and anger surging through me. Meg and Ryan, her mother, and Ryan himself, both stared at me, their expressions a mixture of astonishment and disbelief. They seemed incapable of comprehending the gravity of my statement. Suddenly, Ryan's father, Mr. Adams, materialized, his face etched with concern. Mr. Adams, I continued, my tone unwavering, you mentioned before that you plan to retire soon and hand over your duties to your son. In such circumstances, it's reasonable to reconsider how much my company can trust a future business leader. There might have been an intention to maintain our relationship through your son marrying me, but unfortunately, it has backfired. With that, I turned and quietly left the scene. Megan, who had overheard my conversation, looked devastated, but she couldn't bring herself to speak. This wasn't the end. They would face the consequences of their actions. My name is Sarah Bryant. I am 48 years old and have never been married. Remaining single all my life, I have always prioritized work and cherished my alone time. Thanks to my hobbies of reading and watching movies, I've spent fulfilling days. That's why I never developed an interest in marriage. But then, that spring in April, when the flowers were in full bloom, an unexpected marriage proposal came my way. The introducer was Matthew Adams, with whom I had a business relationship. Miss Bryant, I would very much like to introduce you to someone. What do you think? He asked. Initially hesitant, I decided to meet the person after being strongly urged. That person was Ryan, the same age as me and Mr. Adams' son. He was the youngest son, with several older sisters. He had come close to marriage several times before but remained unmarried. I have one request if you don't mind, I said. My first meeting with Ryan was conditional. Ryan was a polite and kind person, and I immediately took a liking to him. I started thinking that maybe it would be all right to marry him. So I suggested that we start dating. Both Mr. Adams and Ryan were pleased with this proposal, and things started smoothly. However, I could never have imagined that this choice would lead to an unexpected situation later on. 5 weeks into our relationship, on our third date, Ryan said with a smile, "We're already like a couple, aren't we?" Unlike before, Ryan wore a casual jacket and appeared relaxed and youthful. I had switched from my previous dressed-up style to a casual pants look. Although we were both older, our feelings at that moment felt as fresh as those of young people. However, as the date began, I felt something off about Ryan's behavior. He often made comments that seemed condescending. For example, he took me to a slightly upscale restaurant and said, "Probably you wouldn't normally get to come to a place like this, right? It must be unusual for you." I could only respond with an ambiguous smile. This restaurant was one of my favorites, and I had just visited it with a friend 3 days ago. But it would have been cruel to embarrass him on the spot, so I didn't tell him the truth. A waiter I knew nodded at my signal and pretended to be ignorant. While sitting, I noticed the watch on Ryan's wrist. It wasn't a top-of-the-line item, but it was decent. That's a different watch from before, I commented. The color is lovely, and it suits you. Embarrassed, Ryan took off the watch to show it to me, mistaking my interest for genuine admiration. He seemed to offer it out of kindness. Since I wasn't deeply interested, I briefly checked it and returned it. But he insisted again, "Feel free to take a closer look. It's not often you see something this high-end, right? No need to be shy." My reaction wasn't so much out of politeness as it was just a lack of interest in men's watches. Though I agreed to take a closer look when he insisted, I felt a bit perplexed. To me, a watch is just an accessory, and I think checking the time on a smartphone is sufficient. Many of the older people I work with wear them too, so I see them quite often. "Thank you for showing it to me," I said. "It's nice to have something you like." Ryan slightly pouted and surreptitiously followed my belongings with his gaze. What caught his interest was a bag that I am particularly fond of. This bag was specially made for me at a favorite workshop, reflecting the craftsman's skill and my taste. It's very practical, if a bit pricey, but it seemed cheap to Ryan. "Don't you have a proper bag instead?" he asked. "I think you should have something more prestigious." The bag was custom-made at an Italian bag store and naturally doesn't have a brand logo. The Craftsman's Workshop logo is branded on the bottom of the bag. However, I prefer simple designs above all, so I asked to hide it. It would be difficult for someone not accustomed to women's bags to judge its price just by looking. But I couldn't help but be puzzled by his consistently superior tone. Sometimes I dismissed it, accepting that he's a sheltered son who doesn't know the world, but the feeling of discomfort didn't easily go away. At one point, I thought about reconsidering marriage, but since we'd only met 3 times, it seemed too hasty to decide on a separation. So I decided to wait and see how things would unfold. Since then, we have continued dating. Ryan does show some immaturity at times, but he is essentially an honest person. He no longer exhibits the unnatural behavior he showed before. "No one is perfect from the start," an older female celebrity said on a show I watched for distraction. "If you have patience and gradually find harmony, love will eventually grow." I found some truth in those words. The following week, we went to a famous hotel buffet for our 5th date. Strangely, Ryan piled 3 or 4 servings of food onto his plate. "Are you sure it's okay to take so much?" I commented lightly. "It would be a waste if you can't finish it." He suddenly burst into laughter. "Wondering what's so funny?" he asked. "A waste, Sarah? Are you still talking like someone poor? It's okay to take this much. It doesn't matter if I throw it away if I can't eat it all." I made a sour face. It seemed he completely failed to understand that wasting food not only incurs costs, but also discomforts other customers. The issue isn't just about money. It's about resources and the environment. "Aren't you aware of the concept of food waste?" I said, my voice carrying more sternness than usual. "It's also inconsiderate to other customers, and eating disorderly isn't good." In response, Ryan suddenly shrank back, poking at his pasta with a fork and muttering, "I'm sorry. Please don't be angry. My mom said you might be marrying me for money, and I just reacted without thinking." The word "mom" lingered in my ears, and I inadvertently repeated it. Referring to one's mother as mom at nearly 50 years old is uncommon and suggests a peculiarity about his family environment. As the date neared its end, with this discomfort in mind, Ryan drove me home. As I was getting out of the car, he grabbed my hand to stop me. "Miss Bryant," he said, "even though I am who I am, would you marry me? Even if not right away, being engaged is fine. Your fiancé can wait as long as it takes." I was taken aback by Ryan's sudden forwardness, but soon I began to feel genuine joy from his actions. Though there are many concerning aspects about Ryan, his courtship brought pure joy. I considered that the areas he lacked could be improved upon after marriage, nurturing him into a loving husband. 3 months had passed since we met, and I felt it was the right time to move forward. "Let's grow together by complementing each other," I said, my eyes brimming with tears, moved by emotion. "We both have flaws and differences, so let's talk a lot and resolve them." However, the moment I agreed to the proposal, Ryan once again exhibited problematic behavior. "Let's start preparing for married life first," he began with a smile. You should quit your job, take care of the home, and learn housework from my mom. My joy vanished, replaced by rising anger. I countered him more strongly than usual. Don't be so presumptuous, I said. If that's your attitude, then marriage is out of the question. Goodbye. Ryan was silent, stunned. At that moment, I got out of the car and immediately went back into my house. Though I had decided to distance myself, I reluctantly agreed to meet after receiving a message from Ryan over the weekend, insisting on seeing me. The weekend came quickly, and Ryan was already waiting at our meeting place when the appointed day arrived. As I approached, Ryan stood up quickly and apologized deeply. I'm sorry about last time, he said, his energy low, which soon began to dissolve my anger. My friends told me to lay down the law, and I took it seriously. They even scolded me for actually thinking it's okay to do that. Just a while ago, I felt like clicking my tongue at him, but ultimately, I came to terms with it. It's somewhat disappointing, but he is dear to me. Ryan is very straightforward, and sometimes it might be hard for him to distinguish between jokes and seriousness. He is easily influenced and somewhat indecisive. But I reminded myself that no one is perfect from the start. Make sure you keep this in mind, I said with a reassuring smile. We're getting engaged after all. At those words, Ryan looked up suddenly and brightened. Immediately after a stormy engagement period, a month passed and finally, it was time to formally meet each other's families to announce our marriage. The first visit was to Ryan's family home. Although I had a long association with Mr. Adams, it was strictly professional, and this was my first time visiting his home, which was nerve-wracking. Ryan was as gentle and lovely as usual, but he seemed a bit off since the morning of the visit. I thought he might be nervous, but apparently, that wasn't the case. About my mom, he started, and I braced myself, thinking of the potential issues between a daughter-in-law and mother-in-law. However, I believed in his mother, known to be a hard-working woman and the kind-hearted wife of Mr. Adams. I hoped that if I spoke sincerely, she would understand. But I was mistaken. Yikes! The moment I stepped into the room where we were supposed to greet each other, liquid splashed onto my face. My eyes hurt intensely, and a strong irritation hit my nose, causing me to cough violently. I immediately panicked. How about that? You poor thing. I got rid of the poor smell for you, so be thankful, I heard a mocking voice say. I was surprised by the bitter taste, smell, and heat. I realized the liquid that entered my mouth was champagne, but I was confused about why I received such treatment. Megan, what are you doing? Mr. Adams exclaimed in shock. The situation became clear. Ryan's mother and my future mother-in-law, Megan, had thrown champagne in my face. It seemed the earlier mocking voice was all Megan. I remembered how Ryan had previously looked down on me as poor. I realized that this attitude might have come from Megan. Haha. What's the matter, Sarah? You're all wet. Funny, isn't it? Go, Mom. Ryan laughed loudly. At that moment, I realized that everything up to this point had been in vain. Only emptiness piled up in my heart. I will therefore terminate our contract with your company, I stated, my voice cold and resolute. What? Ryan and Megan both exclaimed in surprise. They hurriedly looked at each other and seemed to be discussing something in whispers. Whether it was about our business dealings or something else, I was not involved. As an outsider, I merely speculated about their conversation. At that moment, there was one person who remained quiet. Mr. Adams, without a word, looked pale and wide-eyed. I turned to him again, thanked him, and began to speak. First of all, Mr. Adams, I would like to thank you for your cooperation so far. It must be due to the condition we agreed upon that such an incident did not occur before then. When I turned to speak to Megan and Ryan, Megan looked at Mr. Adams with a doubtful expression and then stared at me sternly. Meanwhile, Ryan watched Megan's reaction while looking at me. I continued quietly, this may be an unexpected statement for them, but I hope they listen carefully. One condition of accepting the matchmaking was that I would not reveal I am the president of a company until the marriage was decided. I thought my title might get in the way. My connection with Mr. Adams was born out of significant business transactions that I had built over the years while focusing on my business. I picked up my business card. Naturally, it listed my company name and position. Those not involved in management might not know the details of our transactions, but they would at least understand the title. "Hello again, Mrs. Megan," I said, my voice laced with sarcasm. "Thank you for all your help so far. This is my position. I have been working with your husband's company for over 10 years. Currently, my company is probably your biggest client. I wonder what percentage of your company's sales we represent." When I handed over my business card, Ryan turned pale with surprise. He worked in his father's company, and seeing my company name should have made it clear who I was to Mr. Adams. I am not just any business owner. I am the owner of one of his most important business partners. Therefore, I wanted my profession hidden initially to truly assess Ryan's character when choosing a lifelong partner. I wanted to see the real person, not just superficial behavior. I cannot afford a contrived attitude because it could affect the fate of a parent company. Thus, I was introduced merely as someone I met through work. I wore fake glasses and significantly altered my makeup and hairstyle for our dates. While the disguise served as a temporary amusement, in retrospect, it was a waste of time. "I'm sorry, Mr. Adams, but I must decline this proposal," I stated, my voice steady and unwavering. "This concerns marriage, and also, we need to pause our transactions to reassess the situation." Then, I sat down to face Mr. Adams. Afterward, I explained the situation as calmly as possible. Mr. Adams turned pale upon hearing my words and stuttered, "The transactions are affected? That can't be right." But his reaction seemed forced. I shook my head firmly, indicating that my decision was final. However, wanting him to understand that my decision wasn't based on a fleeting emotion, I continued in a calm voice, "Mr. Adams, you mentioned before about planning to retire soon and handing over your responsibilities to your son. In such circumstances, it makes sense to reconsider how trustworthy a future business partner can be. There might have been an intention to maintain our relationship through your son marrying me, but unfortunately, it has backfired. Right after graduating from university," I continued, "I started my own company with some friends. Over 20 years have passed since then, and I have been leading the business as its president throughout that time. As I've mentioned several times, I have built a relationship with Mr. Adams' company over more than a decade. My company, managed from a female perspective, has been recognized for its unique approach and has been growing significantly recently. As a result, our transactions with Mr. Adams' company have also increased. However, recently, there has been internal discussion about whether to switch to new business partners. Amidst this situation, the sudden proposal of an arranged marriage came up. Considering the timing, Mr. Adams might have sensed some movement from our company. This was not particularly kept secret. After finding out who I was, Megan and Ryan were disturbed. I decided to explain the situation further to them. "We were reviewing whether to continue our transaction with your company," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I heard that your company is currently facing some management difficulties. Are you aware of that? As contracts with other partners are ending, this information is crucial." "What does that mean?" Megan asked, shocked, while frantically shaking Mr. Adams' arm beside her. Mr. Adams wiped his sweat in a flustered manner, looking anxious. "It seems that the company's issues have not been discussed within the family." Ryan's glances between me and Mr. Adams caught my attention. Despite being an insider, Ryan appeared not to understand the current state of his own company. While considering this puzzling situation, I continued the conversation. "In light of this," I said, "Mr. Adams strongly suggested I meet with you, Ryan, leading us to this point. Perhaps you considered this marriage proposal with the stability of your company in mind. It seems you wish to maintain our business relationship at all costs." Megan was visibly shaken. Her hands trembled, and her lips quivered. "Mr. Adams' company is indeed struggling with management issues," I explained, my tone matter-of-fact. "Megan may have looked down on me earlier, but her company is facing far more significant problems. Once praised for quality and speed, Mr. Adams' products have been technologically overtaken by competitors, no longer offering anything special. Moreover, the development and manufacturing processes are inefficient. Cost reduction has not progressed, and product prices have become expensive. Additionally, the company imposes unacceptable levels of pressure on employees under modern labor standards, shortening delivery times and further deteriorating the corporate reputation. Adopting products from a low-rated company can cause a domino effect, dragging down the reputation of business partners. Even a company with a long history faces challenges with outdated structures and a high turnover rate among young employees. As a result, Mr. Adams' company's market share has gradually decreased, and its performance continues to decline. Under such circumstances, I concluded it was natural for us to explore transactions with other stable companies. "How dare you threaten to cut off business based on personal feelings?" Megan exclaimed in outrage, her voice laced with venom. "What a despicable act. Are you blackmailing us? This is the worst. Don't think such behavior is acceptable." Despite her actions being the cause, I was surprised by her accusatory behavior. The lack of an initial apology spoke volumes about her character. Before I could point this out, Mr. Adams shouted vehemently, "Silence. This is all your fault." I swallowed what I was about to say. Indeed, it is likely that Mr. Adams, not I, is the most at fault here. The unexpected fallout from his wife's inappropriate behavior would have been unforeseen for him, who had hoped for stability. All of this stems from Mr. Adams' actions to faithfully adhere to our agreement. But in reality, keeping it a secret from Ryan alone would have been sufficient. He should have informed his wife beforehand. As a result, I am relieved that I didn't have to welcome such a problem person as my mother-in-law. The sight of Ryan was pitiful. He was pale and trembling, tightly gripping Megan's hand. It is sad to see a 48-year-old man still needing his mother's hand. Seeing his state, I couldn't help but give him a cold look. It's impossible that you, carrying such a cheap-looking bag, could be a president. Moreover, you complained about food waste and acted like you were poor. You are lying even about being my father's business partner. How disgraceful! Ryan vehemently accused me. He might be trying to blame me, but he is mistaken. I am not interested in branded goods and prefer to use high-quality domestic leather products. Also, my criticism of wasting a large amount of ordered food wasn't because I am poor, but simply because it is inappropriate behavior. There can be no calculated acting in this regard. As for this bag, it is custom-made from a workshop I frequent. Anyone knowledgeable would recognize its quality immediately, but it seems none of you are interested in the quality of leather. This bag is priced higher than commercial brands. Suddenly, Megan stared at my shoes and bag with astonishment, then quickly averted her gaze, embarrassed. It's a matter of those who know and understand, I continued further. Moreover, ordering a large amount of food and not being able to finish it is not only wasteful, but also disrespectful to the restaurant. It is unreasonable and inappropriate behavior. Furthermore, the fact that I am your father's business partner is true. What would it mean if the presidents of companies doing business with each other did not know one another? Ryan seemed dissatisfied and unconvinced by this discussion. Mr. Adams frowned at his son's behavior. When we confirmed that we knew each other, Ryan looked down without a word. His clinging to Megan appeared extremely childish and out of place for his age. Faced with his immaturity, I couldn't help feeling how disappointed I was. "If your company abandons us, we will be on the brink of bankruptcy." Mr. Adams began to apologize profusely. "Please forgive us." This clear statement from him seemed to finally make Megan realize the situation. Realizing the gravity of his actions, Ryan turned pale and began to tremble. "Mom," he said with tears in his eyes, clinging to Megan in his distress. However, Megan was unable to respond in any way. Witnessing this scene, I breathed a deep sigh of relief from the bottom of my heart. I deeply regretted ever considering sharing my life with such a person, thinking that because he was honest, I could correct him and make things better. Now it seems like a naive thought in retrospect. I'm so sorry," Mr. Adams repeated his apologies over and over without actually proposing how to address the situation or how to make them reflect on their actions. This could easily lead to severing ties on an emotional basis. Therefore, I was forced to make specific remarks about the engagement. "Let's address our engagement," I said, my voice firm. "I cannot consider marrying someone whose mother behaves so rudely." Moreover, he did not try to stop his mother, and even laughed along with her. I hope you understand why the engagement should be called off. Mr. Adams listened, repeating words of affirmation. I continued the conversation. Thank you for understanding, I said. Until yesterday, I believed in Ryan's potential for improvement and proceeded with the engagement, but now I feel relieved that our relationship has been dissolved. Furthermore, I provided specific examples of Ryan's behavior. For instance, his frequent quoting of his mother's opinions, saying, "Mom said so," and then his behavior of calling his mother, Mom, at nearly 50 years of age. He often used his mother's opinions as a shield to justify his improper behavior. However, his weakness became apparent as soon as I pointed out these issues. He quickly became disheartened. There were countless examples of these behaviors. Mr. Adams was astonished, his mouth agape. Megan also showed embarrassment. However, Ryan himself seemed not to understand what part of his behavior was problematic. Regarding calling off the engagement, I asked, "Is there any fault on my part?" Mr. Adams shook his head almost imperceptibly. His action seemed pitiful. I paused to calm myself and took a deep breath. "I will divorce my wife," Mr. Adams declared, his voice heavy with regret. "Ryan will also have to move out with her. The company's operations will be taken over by competent staff, so please do not abandon us. Help us." He made it clear that he understood the gravity of the situation. "What? That's not possible," Megan cried out in shock. "I can't manage my life without this marriage." After that, Ryan and Megan both raised their voices at Mr. Adams. "Why didn't you tell us beforehand? I am innocent. Why am I being kicked out? The problem is only with Mom. I am not involved there," they protested simultaneously. Their voices filled the room with a cacophony of anger and disbelief. Fed up with everything, I finally let out a real sigh. "Well, as you wish," I said to Mr. Adams alone. "Thank you for your time. I will take my leave now." I quickly left. I needed to go home and take my high-quality clothes to the dry cleaners right away, otherwise, the champagne stains would set and render them unwearable. Ryan stopped his protest and wept, seemingly accepting the situation. Megan tried to retort, but was silenced by a stern reprimand from Mr. Adams. However, she still appeared to grit her teeth in dissatisfaction, looking far more determined than her son. 5 months after the unpleasant incident with the 3 members of the Adams family, as predicted, Mr. Adams resigned from his position. It wasn't just a retirement, but a resignation, taking responsibility for the deteriorating performance of the company. The main reason for the decline in performance was the termination of the contract with my company. A former subordinate who took over as the new president conducted a comprehensive review of the operations. Breaking away from family management was well received, and external evaluations improved. He was proactive in developing new products, and the results were beginning to show. At this rate, resuming the interrupted transactions might be imminent. Furthermore, Mr. Adams and Megan officially divorced. Ryan moved out with Megan as anticipated and started a new life together, but rumors persist of daily conflicts between them. The once close relationship between mother and son might have been based primarily on financial comfort. After being expelled from his father's company, Ryan quickly fell into unemployment. Unable to bear Ryan's financial dependence, Megan left him in Mr. Adams' care and disappeared herself. I heard she now lives alone in an old, low-end apartment, mourning her fate. Megan once boasted of her lavish lifestyle, but it seems her behavior pushed many people away. Now she has neither helpers nor friends and has become a lonely figure. About a year after Mr. Adams' retirement, I had a chance encounter with the former president when I visited his former company. I unexpectedly ran into him. "I am very sorry for the great inconvenience I caused before," former Mr. Adams said. He had generously transferred half of his property to Megan. However, the main reasons for her financial troubles were Ryan's demands and Megan's continued extravagant spending. Unfortunately, this is nothing but personal responsibility, and sympathy is hard to come by. Former Mr. Adams initially planned to keep Ryan at a distance. However, he was shocked to learn that his nearly 50-year-old son didn't even know how to boil water, and eventually, they ended up living together. He seems to be firmly educating Ryan, including making various decisions within the household. Since Ryan had completely depended on Megan, he had never learned basic life skills. I feel that I have not properly looked after my son and wife until now, he sighed. This is the misfortune I created for myself. Although it's late, I am deeply reflecting. I think I also did some wrong things to Megan. Fortunately, the company did not go bankrupt, and I am relieved. The tired Mr. Adams, now staying at home, is seriously engaging with Ryan for the first time. Ryan, facing unprecedented challenges with household chores and part-time jobs despite his age, seems to frequently cry. I can only hope that he becomes a decent person. However, I do not wish to have any more dealings with him ever again. 3 years have passed since then, and my company is doing very well. My performance has improved compared to before, and the stock price has also risen. Regarding my situation, I am no longer considering marriage. I had already informed my parents when I got engaged, and I explained everything thoroughly when the engagement was dissolved. When I shared the details, they supported my decision to stay single rather than approving my involvement with such a person. As a result, my parents have become even stronger supporters of my dedication to my work. I work actively every day and have taken up new hobbies to lead a more fulfilling life. Although I previously preferred indoor activities, I decided to take up exercising at the gym recently. I can visibly see muscles starting to form. My subordinates look at me with admiration, which is quite a ticklish feeling. I'd always believed that happiness is something you grab for yourself. I seek happiness that I create on my own, not just the happiness that comes from being with someone else. If I were to fall in love again in life, I would prefer it to be towards the end of my life. At life's end, I feel that one can afford to throw everything away for love. However, that's not a concern for now. Currently, my days are fulfilling and I am happy.
This is a really lovely house. It receives amazing light. My in-laws laughed happily as I said, "Yeah, I want to move here as soon as possible." Frel nodded satisfactorily as well. I didn't realize our new house would be so opulent, even though we were only there to give it a sneak peek. My nerves were getting worse as my in-laws and Frel moved forward with their own plans. Will we truly be purchasing this home? Unable to contain my bewilderment, our agent Linda said to me in a quiet voice, "Ma'am, let's talk in another room. We must have a conversation regarding the contract." I nodded, startled by Linda's serious expression. Nervous, I followed them into a different room. I had assumed she would pressure me for a deal right away, but what she said caught me off guard. "You should run away immediately." What? She said something unexpected, and I was confused. Run away? How would you put it? With a nervous tone, Linda said, "I'm sorry for shocking you so suddenly, but I've witnessed something." Her remarks contained startling information. I go by Pamela Moore. This year marks my 32nd birthday. While my spouse, Frel, and I are not yet parents, we are seriously considering purchasing a home together in the near future. Though Frel would rather live in a more private, detached home, I have been missing the charm of a downtown apartment. Specifically, this is due to Frel's parents. Although my mother-in-law, Hazel, is 65 years old, and my father-in-law, George, is 66, they are both relatively young for their age and require lifestyle modifications due to their physical disabilities. Frel's family was involved in a car accident when he was a high school student. His parents suffered serious injuries, but he only sustained minor ones. His father-in-law, George, suffered an injury that severely limited the use of one leg, and his mother-in-law, Hazel, hurt her back. His parents' lives drastically changed after the accident, forcing them to resign from their jobs. Frel put in a lot of work after high school to provide for his parents' care, as well as their means of subsistence. This indicates the extent to which he values his family. At the age of 26, we were introduced by a mutual friend. When I first met Frel, I thought she was a real person who put family first. He put his parents first at all times, sometimes to the point of being overly cautious. When I found out about his background, I was able to put aside my initial worries that he might be worrying excessively. He drew me in with his kindness and genuine love for his family, and I eventually started to feel a strong connection with him. Our mutual respect and understanding allowed our relationship to gradually grow. We eventually got married after our relationship progressed. Frel has been looking for a detached house during this process so that his parents can live more comfortably. It's obvious that his desire is justified given that he is an only child and his parents' health conditions. Though I've always had some misgivings about his parents, I started to believe that my gut was right over time. When I thought back to the day we announced our intention to get married 3 years ago, I felt a tinge of unease. Hazel gave me a warm welcome the first time I went to see his parents. "Greetings, Pamela. Although our house is small, please feel at home," she said. I said, "Thank you, I will," and carefully entered. As Frel had previously mentioned, I saw that she had difficulty walking. A moment later, George emerged from the rear of the space. "Nice to meet you, Pamela," he stated. "I'm looking forward to getting to know you better," but he stumbled while moving, obviously having trouble supporting his weight on his leg. This demonstrated the lasting effects of the traffic accident and how they affected his ability to work. Nevertheless, they were getting by with the insurance money they were receiving. Knowing this history, I started to identify the cause of my uneasiness. I was genuinely relieved that I had brought the pre-purchased pizza when I saw how they were. I was really appreciative of my in-laws' efforts to extend a warm welcome despite their physical difficulties, and I wanted to lighten their load as much as I could. When I placed the pizza on the table, Hazel exclaimed with joy, "I'm sorry for having you prepare such a wonderful treat. Thank you so much. Let's eat right away," she said, reaching for the pizza. Without hesitation, I was a bit surprised to see them eating so eagerly, but their genuine expressions of joy warmed my heart. At that moment, Frel jokingly exclaimed, "Hey, both of you starting without us? We're starving over here too." Hazel quickly responded, "Oh, I'm sorry. It's just that I haven't seen such delicious-looking pizza in so long. I couldn't help myself. But don't worry, there's plenty for you and Pamela, too," she answered with a smile. As she did, she placed a can of emergency food on the table, saying modestly, "I'm sorry, it's just this." George also smiled and thanked her, saying, "Thanks, dear." Seeing my surprised face, Frel asked me, "What's wrong, Pamela? You look so shocked." I hesitated and muttered, well, trying to find the right words, when Frel suddenly stood up, realizing, "Oh, I forgot the drinks." "Look, I've brought them," said George, carrying a tray with glasses for everyone, walking with a bit of a stumble but making a determined effort. "Thank you, Dad. Mom, I'm sorry I should have prepared this." As I took the tray, I was shocked. The glasses were worn and some were cracked. The contents were just water. I saw my father-in-law fetching water from the bathroom earlier. Could it really be just tap water? "Thank you," was all I could manage to say. Eventually, my in-laws ended up eating almost all of the pizza I had brought, even though I had intended for it to be shared among all of us. They were holding the pizza box repeatedly, saying, "It's delicious," and ate very quickly, creating an atmosphere where I felt I couldn't join in. Frel had no problem eating the canned side dishes. I had brought the pizza wanting them to enjoy it, which was fine, but the canned food was unexpected. When I happened to pick up a can, I noticed it was nearing its expiration date. I ignored it and continued to eat silently. I could hardly taste anything. Seeing my silence, Hazel expressed concern and asked, "Did the simple meal make you feel sick?" "No, that's not it," I replied. "You can be honest with us. Frel told us your family owns a lot of land, so you must be used to a different level of cuisine. I'm sorry we can only provide something so modest. At first, I felt like she was being spiteful, but it seemed she genuinely believed that. I was even more confused about how to respond. It's not like that, I replied hesitantly as Hazel looked at me weakly. I'm sorry. Frel might have told you, but we are physically disabled. That prevents us from going to the supermarket often, and we can't provide as much hospitality as we'd like. It's frustrating to think about what we could do if we were more able-bodied. George nodded in agreement. Faced with their remarks, I found myself at a loss for words. It's enough, really. Thank you so much. It was clear that despite their physical limitations, my in-laws were doing their best to make us feel welcome. With their inability to work, it's understandable that their lives are more constrained. We only had canned food and tap water to make do with. Although I prepared pizza for everyone, it was somewhat unsatisfying to see it quickly consumed by just the two of them. Yet Frel didn't seem to mind, and I felt it might be inappropriate to say anything. In the end, I left their house still harboring that dissatisfaction. Later, as we progressed with our wedding plans, Frel apologized with a serious look on his face. I'm sorry my parents can't contribute financially to the wedding expenses. It's okay. We were planning to use our own savings anyway. So don't worry, I responded cheerily. I had already advised my parents to refrain from contributing too, fearing it might embarrass his parents if only one side offered financial support. Consequently, we decided to have a modest ceremony. Afterward, I received a call from Hazel. She apologized for not being able to help with the wedding expenses and said she wanted to send some home appliances as a gesture of her goodwill. Despite my reservations, she insisted on sending them. A few days later, several large cardboard boxes arrived at our house, which surprised me with their number. Upon opening them, they were packed with vintage appliances that were no longer on the market: old vacuum cleaners, a faded microwave, and other clearly well-used items. I also noticed the cracked cups and dishes that I had seen during our marriage introduction visit. All these had come from my in-laws' home. What kind of joke is this? I was at a loss for words, seeing Frel happily appreciating the gesture. These appliances were used in your mother's house, weren't they? They look quite old, I pointed out reflexively. Well, they still work, and we should be grateful, Frel replied with a satisfied expression. Despite my surprise, as a matter of courtesy, I expressed our gratitude. I reluctantly contacted my mother-in-law. The appliances have arrived. Thank you. Oh, they've already arrived? Those are things we've cherished for many years. I couldn't bear to throw them away, thinking they'd be useful to you newlyweds. You need appliances, right? Her cheerful voice only increased my dissatisfaction. However, many of them are quite worn, and some do not work. We appreciate the gesture, but plan to purchase new ones. That's such a waste. It would help you save money. About saving money, I really wanted to buy you new ones, but it's difficult for us. It's hard for us to get around, so we gave what we had at home. If they were worried about money, they didn't have to send anything. Moreover, my mother-in-law must have mentioned this to Frel because he approached me about it. Pamela, I heard you complained about the appliances. My parents went out of their way to send us household items. Don't take their intentions lightly. I didn't mean it that way. This made me feel like the villain. I ended up having to use the old appliances. This wasn't how I envisioned enjoying our newlywed life. It's a situation I find hard to accept, but I kept telling myself that they were considering finances in their own way. Then Frel proposed buying a new house. I have always dreamed of having my own home. Normally, this would be exciting news, but Frel seems to want a home that could accommodate living with his parents in the future. I'm troubled by this idea. Reflecting on my past interactions with his parents, I feel uneasy. I wonder if it's really okay to live together, given their priority has always been saving money, which is why they sent the old appliances. Initially, I thought they were trying to help in any way they could, but I began to doubt their intentions. Later, when I visited my in-laws' house, I noticed that all their appliances had been replaced with the latest models. This raised many suspicions in my mind. I had heard they were financially struggling, but was that really true? They used to say they couldn't go shopping due to difficulty in getting around. However, nowadays it's easy to make purchases online without needing to visit physical stores. This made me think that perhaps they just repurposed their old appliances as a wedding gift for us. I couldn't bring myself to tell Frel, but I felt anxious that living together might force us into a frugal lifestyle. Furthermore, considering their situation, I felt that new construction was out of the question. I was worried that they might suggest choosing a low-cost, aging house. Contrary to my concerns, they seemed to want a solidly built home. In fact, they were already looking at some properties. "Seems like things are moving along," I said, perplexed. "Yes, I took a drive last weekend and found a wonderful new property that I really liked," Frel responded, as if it were obvious. "Why didn't you tell me about this?" I felt left out and downhearted. Discussions about the house I was supposed to live in were being made without my knowledge. Feeling dissatisfied, I decided to go see the property. Frel, his parents, and I headed to the real estate agency. On arrival, the agent quickly approached us. She was a young and attractive woman. Her business card read, "Linda Martin." "Ma'am, nice to meet you. I am Linda, and I'll be handling your case," she said. Frel had arranged a car for us to go see the property together. Inside the car, my in-laws were chatting amicably with Linda. It seemed the new house was a ready-built home in a high-end area. I had a vague sense of unease. Eventually, our car stopped in front of the property. It was a luxurious single-family home with a spacious yard, clearly in an upscale neighborhood. We went inside and toured the layout. While in the living room, my in-laws were very excited. "Really, this house is charming. It gets such good light," they said. "Indeed, I want to start living here as soon as possible." As the conversation progressed, I felt anxious and couldn't help but interrupt. "Excuse me, but this is my first visit here." "Oh, is that so?" "My apologies," Linda replied, handing me the brochure. I was shocked when I saw the brochure. The price was clearly beyond our budget. It was likely a house we could not afford. Nevertheless, my in-laws and Frel seemed eager to pursue this property. As I was sweating with confusion, Linda was staring at me, her expression suggesting she had something to say. Holding the brochure, I pondered how to handle the situation. Soon after, my in-laws started walking towards the terrace. Frel joined them to provide support. They were deeply engrossed in their conversation. Then, as if she had made up her mind, Linda turned towards me and whispered quietly, "Ma'am, let's talk in another room. There's something about the contract we need to discuss." Surprised by her serious expression, I nodded. She led me to another room, and I was filled with anxiety. I thought she might press me to sign a contract immediately. However, what she said next was completely unexpected. "You should run away immediately." "What?" I was confused by her unexpected words. "What do you mean, run away? I'm sorry for startling you so suddenly, but I've witnessed something," she began, looking uneasy. What she revealed was shocking. It turns out that Frel and his parents had been coming to this property previously. According to her, during those visits, his parents walked without any assistance. What does that mean? My in-laws are supposed to have difficulty walking. I couldn't understand. They always seemed to struggle with walking. That's why working was difficult for them and shopping was a challenge. What on earth? I only managed to say that, Linda suggested. Would you like to see for yourself? She suggested peeking through a slightly open door to observe the three of them covertly. Indeed, my in-laws were walking on their own. They weren't using any canes or assistants. Why? Why would they pretend to be unable to walk? This could be evidence, so you should record a video, she advised. Her calm voice echoed. Evidence? What exactly? I'll explain in more detail later. Following her instructions, I shakily took out my phone and recorded a video of my in-laws walking. I just stood there, stunned. I couldn't comprehend what was happening. According to her, it seemed that my in-laws were pretending to have mobility issues. Therefore, she had recommended housing that was accessible for disabled persons. This house could have ramps installed, which would make moving around easier. She had suggested this, but my in-laws burst into laughter. "Oh no, we don't need anything like that," they said, and started walking briskly away. She did not understand why they were deceiving her. However, the reason became clear later when it came to providing mortgage documents. It was revealed that the contracts were being processed under my name. Here are the necessary documents. The documents clearly had my name on them. As she discreetly listened to their conversation, she overheard a shocking discussion between them. After all, it's best if Pamela pays for the loan. We've been pretending to be injured. We did receive a significant amount from the insurance, but we've almost used it up on the new appliances we bought. Mom, you're being too direct. But that's what we've been planning all along, isn't it? Find someone from a wealthy family. While my mother-in-law was nonchalant, my father-in-law also seemed satisfied. Frel kept his promise, didn't he? Pamela trusts us completely. A kind-hearted, wealthy person is easy to manipulate. Learning the truth, I was astounded. My in-laws had deliberately pretended to have mobility issues to fraudulently receive insurance money. Frel was aware of these facts all along. After she had let me hear that conversation between the three of them, I was silent for a while. I had never imagined that I would be the one paying the mortgage. In fact, my family owns several properties, and I had mentioned this when I first met Frel. However, our lifestyle is very ordinary. My parents have always encouraged frugality, and we don't own expensive items. My income is not substantial. I'm just a regular office worker. I had never dreamed that being a landowner would make me a target for Frel's advances. Thinking that it meant wealth, I was overwhelmed and unable to react. Linda apologized to me. "I'm truly sorry for bringing this up so suddenly." "No, oh please don't worry about it. On the contrary, I appreciate you telling me," I replied emphatically. Noticing her expression darkened, she continued, "The matter is not yet concluded." What followed was even more shocking. Frel had said, "We'll need to draw on Pamela's resources moving forward." His mother had added, laughing, "Hey, next, give her a little nudge. I'll teach her how to pretend to fall and claim long-term medical expenses. She'll surely be delighted to learn how a little pain can bring in money." I was horrified. They intended to involve me in their fraud. "What do you mean?" They were speaking as if it were merely a push, but the intention was clearly to cause injury. The thought of being coaxed into committing such deceit was unforgivable. "I'm sorry to bring such distressing news, but I felt it necessary to tell you. This is a clear criminal act, and it could harm you as well." She spoke with evident concern in her voice. The implications were hard to believe, and even harder to accept. Witnessing the scene firsthand, I saw my in-laws walking boldly. My name was on the mortgage documents, and there was Frel, who had deceived me. The shock made me dizzy, and I stumbled. "Are you okay?" Linda caught me just as I was about to fall. I had to pull myself together. As my real estate agent, she had courageously revealed the truth. I had to take some action. Thank you. I'm fine. I was just startled by this unexpected revelation. I have no intention of engaging in fraud, and now that I know the truth, I cannot simply ignore what my in-laws are doing, I declared firmly. My determination was clear to her, and she nodded in acknowledgement. There was no time to waste. We immediately discussed the next steps to take. After that, I hurriedly left the building through a different exit while she distracted my in-laws using the excuse of feeling unwell. I messaged Frel that I was heading home ahead of him. Once home, I quickly started gathering evidence. I searched online for the date and details of the accident my in-laws had mentioned, information about the insurance company, and the doctors treating them. As soon as I was prepared, I decided to notify the insurance company. I raised the issue of fraudulent claims and explained the details to their special investigations unit. I also made sure to attach and send the video I had recorded today via email. As a result, the insurance company held my in-laws criminally responsible, and they were arrested. It later emerged that the injuries they had sustained in the accident were indeed minor. Nevertheless, they had exaggerated their symptoms to continue receiving insurance payouts fraudulently. Normally, insurance companies are very vigilant about the potential for fraud in cases of traffic accidents. I had been wondering how they managed to deceive the audits, but the truth was eventually revealed. Shockingly, they had conspired with a relative who was a doctor to forge medical certificates, exaggerating minor injuries as severe ones. It's unbelievable. Of course, that doctor was also arrested. This doctor had previously been flagged by the insurance company for irregularities, which led to their swift arrest along with my in-laws. In the end, they were just a greedy family. It went beyond mere frugality. They were criminals, and Frel, who had overlooked all this, was essentially complicit. I brought everything to light and filed for divorce. However, Frel did not accept this and opposed it. He claimed it was all a misunderstanding and pleaded with me to at least meet his mother. I could not understand what he thought was misunderstood. I had no desire for a reunion, but there was something I still needed to say. Together with Frel, I went to the prison where his parents were being held. Due to the gravity of their crimes, they received indefinite sentences without the option for fines. As a result, my in-laws were incarcerated. Stepping into the visiting room, I saw that his mother already looked dispirited. Separated by an acrylic panel, I fixed a sharp gaze on her. "Mother-in-law, you've been committing fraud for a long time, and you intended to involve me as well. Why would you do such a thing?" Her response was feeble. "What do you mean, such a thing?" There was really an accident, and initially I truly was incapacitated. But even as my condition improved, I thought we could benefit from continuing to claim for medical expenses. I was astounded that she didn't seem to recognize the criminality of her actions. I responded firmly, "What are you talking about? That is clearly a crime. It's incomprehensible that you would coerce me into wrongdoing." At that moment, Frel interrupted. "No, it was just an easy way to make money. It was a mistake, but I thought you'd understand, considering how your family has wealth and lives comfortably. You get it, right?" Fed up with Frel's flippant attitude, I reached my limit. "What? Don't mix things up. Both my parents and I work honestly. We don't think about making money through crimes. This is unforgivable as a human being. Please never contact me again." At my forceful words, both Frel and his mother were visibly shocked. The true nature of Frel and his mother was clear. I had never imagined they were such terrible people. They only thought about making easy money and exploiting others. Even after being arrested, there was no sign of remorse. Feeling that I could no longer deal with this situation, I left Frel behind and walked out of the prison. I would never come back here. Afterward, I proceeded with divorce mediation. It took time, but the divorce was eventually finalized. Frel resigned from his job as his parents' arrest became known at his workplace, making it uncomfortable for him. His whereabouts are unknown to me now. Presumably, his parents are living quietly after their release. I never thought such unscrupulous people really existed. For a while, I couldn't even think about marriage. I decided to focus on my career and switch to a new job. That's when an unexpected encounter happened. I met a kind man who understood and accepted me. He understood the hardships I had experienced and offered comfort. While I hesitated about moving forward, I trusted his character. However, lessons from my previous marriage had made me cautious. He tried to alleviate those fears by introducing me to his parents. His parents warmly welcomed us and served elaborate dishes. I felt genuine joy at this seemingly ordinary kindness. His parents, too, were gentle and broad-minded, just like him. With this family, I knew I could feel secure. We were able to live a tranquil life after getting married as a result. Eventually, my spouse and I started talking about purchasing a home. I brought him to the real estate company I suggested. That was Linda's place of employment. I am so appreciative of her support because it allowed me to recognize the deception earlier. A well-known face welcomed us as soon as we walked into the real estate company. Welcome. Oh, as though she had recognized us. Hello, it's been a while, I smiled in return. She had all of her energy back. She gave me a new business card with the word chief written on it. Her development and experience made me genuinely happy. She said to me politely when my husband wasn't there, "It's great that you found a good partner. I sincerely appreciate that you were honest with me at the time." "I'm grateful." I grinned more. We made the decision to use this real estate company where she works to build our new home. It was a choice made in response to a desire to somehow pay her back. This time, I'm positive that my dream house will come true. Obviously, thinking about our new house made me happy.